Chapter 63:01. The pain in their hearts was constantly magnified. All the pain they had suffered over the years appeared in their minds, constantly sensing their emotions. Every crisis, the slightest carelessness could cost them their lives. Nervousness, panic, and fear were constantly magnified. Everything they had tried so hard to keep could be lost at any time. You will never know if the people you care about will lose their lives in one of the trials. Those people you once knew and hated were once high-spirited, but in the end, they still turned into eerie bones. Actually, as long as they don't go to the trials, they can live well. Is the Tao so important? Why we have to walk the path that others have walked? You cannot be so tired. As long as you let go of all this, let go of this so-called absurd obsession, you will become relaxed. Let go of your obsession. Let go of the worldly troubles of chasing. Then you will be your true self. This voice was ancient and mysterious, sounding like Sanskrit in everyone's hearts. Every sentence carried a settled power, hitting everyone's hearts. An inexplicable feeling of oppression exploded in everyone's hearts, bringing with it an indescribable sadness. All the hard work was actually just your obsession, meaningless. If you were just an ordinary person, then you wouldn't have to work so hard to live an ordinary life. Humans were born to be lonely. Return to the origin and find your original happiness. Everyone was immersed in their own thoughts, and their pessimistic feelings were constantly magnified. Yes, why do they have to work so hard? Actually, they could live a simple and happy life. Come to me. Let go of all your obsession, then you could be truly happy. It was as if there was a pair of warm hands waving at them. As long as they walked forward, they could have true happiness. Come, child, the sea of bitterness is boundless. Turn back and be saved. Everyone unconsciously took a step forward, slowly walking forward. They've been really tired and hard all these years. Now, as long as they walked forward, they could stop the source of all their pain. Everyone looked forward in a daze, thinking about the definition of life. It was as if what they once firmly believed in was now meaningless. There was no power that could support them to continue. The thought of giving up quickly circled in their minds. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were empty and confused. Listening to this ancient and persuasive voice, she vaguely saw a kind of emotion struggling in her heart, as if she felt that there was something wrong with what he said. However, under the influence of pessimism, it was difficult for such emotions to emerge. Bailey Hongzhuang swayed left and right. Her footsteps paused slightly, as if she was trying to figure out what the conflicting emotions were. In the instant she came to a stop, the rising belief in her heart finally became clear. No, all these years of hard work were not in vain. Because she never gave up, because she worked hard, she found her family and gave them a better life. Perhaps if they stopped, they would be able to live a peaceful life. However, in this society where the strong preyed on the weak, no one knew when an accident would happen. Chapter 63:02. Perhaps what they were doing now could not be seen for the time being, but if such a crisis really happened one day, they still had the ability to stabilize the situation. They had walked all the way with pride and arrogance. There was indeed pain and danger. The road ahead was full of thorns. No one knew if they would still be alive in this world in the next moment. But even if they did nothing, the risk still existed. They were not walking the path that others had walked, but the path that they wanted to walk. This kind of pessimistic mood should not belong to them. After this positive thought appeared in her mind, Bailey Hongmei's confused eyes showed a trace of light. That's right. She should not be in this mood. The so-called origin was just the initial appearance of being powerless. Because she did not have the strength, the former Bailey Hongmei was bullied like that when she was young. If she had the strength at that time, then so many things would not have happened later. So, why give up everything and return to her original appearance? The light in the darkness became brighter and brighter. When the pair of eyes became overflowing with light, Bailey Hongzhuang broke free from the enchantment of the demonic sound and regained her consciousness. After finding her true self, Bailey Hongmei realized that she was no longer in the appearance of a child. Instead, she had returned to her original appearance. A faint smile appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang's delicate face. She looked at her familiar hands, and her heart became even more resolute. There were many things that you had always ignored because when you faced them, you would fall into a very complicated mood. But when you truly faced all of this, your heart would become more determined. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that she had been baptized. Not only did her will not waver, it was even more firm and stable than before. Was this an illusion? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the scene in front of her and felt a little puzzled. It was like an illusion, but also not an illusion. There was a kind of unfathomable feeling. This kind of power exceeded her previous understanding and became extremely special. Turning her head, Bailey Hongzhuang found that Di Beichen had also broken free from this kind of despair, because Di Beichen had also changed from his original appearance of a child to a normal appearance. However, other than the two of them, the others were still in the state of being controlled. What the hell is going on? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyes slightly and looked at the others who were slowly walking forward with confused expressions. In front of them was the azure blue sea. With everyone's current appearance as children, once they fell into it, they would definitely die. Di Beichen's handsome face was solemn and cautious. He tried to wake the others up, but found that they were all immersed in their own thoughts and could not be disturbed by external forces. Such a scene was strange, yet familiar to them. Not too long ago, they had also experienced such a scene. It seems that external forces are unable to awaken them. The only way is to rely on their own willpower to break free from despair. Otherwise, both of their hearts sank. They were only a few hundred meters away from the sea. Even if they were walking slowly, it wouldn't be long before they fell into it. Hongzhuang, don't worry. I believe that with everyone's perseverance, we should be able to escape. Chapter 6303. Although the situation in front of them was extremely dangerous, they had experienced all the way and gone through many tests. Their determination was far stronger than ordinary people. Even if they fell into despair and confusion at the beginning, as long as they were given a certain amount of time, they believed that they would be able to break through the shackles and understand everything. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly, and her delicate jade-like face had a trace of calmness. Recalling everything that had happened earlier, a trace of inspiration flashed through her mind. Do you remember that in the strange illusion just now, the ancient voice said, "The sea of bitterness is boundless. Repent, and you'll be saved"? Di Beichen's eyes narrowed slightly. This is a sea, the sea of bitterness abyss. The two of them looked at each other and said this word at the same time. Previously, when they saw the location depicted on the 4 incomplete maps, they vaguely had this conjecture in their minds. The upper realm and the lower realm had 3 abysses. After asking Granny Hua and the others, they clearly understood that the Sea of Bitterness Abyss was not in the celestial region. There must be a reason for the legends passed down from ancient times. The Sea of Bitterness Abyss must exist, but it was gradually forgotten in the long river of history. As long as everything in front of them was connected, there is no doubt that this was most likely the Sea of Bitterness Abyss. No wonder no one knew the location of the Sea of Bitterness Abyss for so many years. This place is so remote, and it's so dangerous to walk here. It's normal that no one knew after a long time. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the blue sea in front of her with emotion. Even if she had not seen the true appearance of the Sea of Bitterness Abyss until now, based on everything she had experienced so far, the Sea of Bitterness Abyss was completely different from the other 2 abysses. Among the 3 abysses, although the inheritance of the first 2 abysses is difficult to obtain, someone has succeeded in obtaining it. Only the Sea of Bitterness Abyss has not been successfully passed through so far. Di Beichen's eyes, which were as deep as the sea, rippled with a complicated light. He looked around cautiously. The Sea of Bitterness Abyss was really too mysterious. This mysterious power could obliterate anyone with a weak will, because everyone would have some pain in their heart and things they did not want to recall. Giving up was a thought that would occasionally appear in everyone's mind. It was just that everyone usually deliberately ignored these thoughts. Nonetheless, when a mysterious power kept magnifying those thoughts, everything became terrifying. The pain that had been suppressed in the bottom of your heart was magnified infinitely. It created a beautiful and carefree environment for you. This was completely in line with human nature because everyone thought the same thing. Not only that, this kind of power was even beyond one's imagination, because some people who had experienced pain before would find it even harder to walk out of such emotions. It was a kind of shackle, a kind of obsession that made it impossible for one to let go. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but look at Mo Yunjue. Of all their pasts, Mo Yunjue was undoubtedly the most painful. Even if she didn't know what kind of painful experience it was, she knew that it was something he didn't want to look back on. Among everyone's expressions, Mo Yunjue seemed to be struggling the most. This was the first time that Bailey Hongzhuang had seen Mo Yunjue reveal such a pained expression. It was as if someone had stabbed his heart viciously. The pain that seeped into his bones would cause anyone to be moved. Chapter 6304. Bailey Yin Che, Xiao Xuanzi, Xiao He, and Xiao Bai were undoubtedly the least affected by this. They did not have any memories of the past, and ever since they recognized their master, they had been living happily. Although they had experienced all kinds of dangers, they all had good endings in the end. To them, being able to accompany their master was the happiest thing. Therefore, the so-called pain did not bring too many negative emotions to them, and happiness was not attractive to them. This was because when they opened their eyes for the first time, they saw their master. They were happiest when they were with their master, and spending the rest of their lives alone was something they were unwilling to accept. Sister, what's going on? Bailey Yin Che could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang after he woke up. The feeling from before was too strange. This should be a test of the bitter sea abyss, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. The bitter sea abyss. Bailey Yin Che was slightly stunned. Is this really the bitter sea abyss? Although we can't be completely sure, according to our judgment, it should be close, Bailey Hongzhuang said after some thought. Xiao Bai looked around curiously. This is the bitter sea abyss, but there are no buildings here, and it seems to be very different from the demonic abyss. Bailey Yin Che and Xiao Xuanzi nodded. According to their thoughts, the bitter sea abyss should also have a huge building, but it was unexpectedly empty, and there was nothing here. All along, other than knowing that the bitter sea abyss exists in the upper realm, there are almost no other records about it. Therefore, we can't get any understanding of the bitter sea abyss from other people's descriptions. Di Baichen looked calm. Since we came here by chance, it's fate. No one said that the three great abyss are similar. The bitter sea abyss has disappeared for so many years, and it shows that it's different. We do have to put aside our previous thoughts. This might be a completely different place. Bailey Hongzhuang had a serious expression. Just this method alone was something that the previous two types of chaos abyss didn't possess. Thinking about it carefully, the first two abysses targeted a cultivator's cultivation and strength, while the abyss of the sea of bitterness targeted a person's heart. The human heart was the most terrifying thing. No matter how strong a cultivator was, there was no guarantee that they could pass the test of their heart. This kind of test had almost nothing to do with strength. It was a completely different kind of test. The most important thing now is to figure out how to make everyone understand all of this. Otherwise, if this continues, once we fall into the sea, I'm afraid we'll be finished. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Mo Yunjue and the others were still moving forward. This situation was extremely dangerous. At this moment, another person returned to his original appearance. After Shangguan Yingying woke up, she angrily rebuked. You want to trick me into giving up? How could this be? I've worked so hard for so long, and now you want me to give up and go back to the beginning? That would be letting myself down. Chapter 6305. Yingying, you're right. Bailey Yin Che smiled and gave her a thumbs up. Speaking of which, when they were in despair, they only felt that their strength was boundless. But in reality, it was just as Yingying had said. Their efforts had not been in vain. Isn't that so? Shangguan Yingying looked disgusted. At first, I was almost confused, but then I thought that something was wrong. This cultivation path was chosen by me. Although the process is difficult, I don't feel pain. Otherwise, wouldn't it be too boring to stay at home and take care of her husband and children all day long? In the future, they would live such a life. Now, they wanted to go out to experience the world and see the wonders of this world. The test of the bitter sea abyss is not a problem for Ying Ying. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. This kind of psychological test had less effect on people with simple minds. Ziren still hasn't figured it out. His will is not as strong as mine. Shangguan Yingying looked at Wen Ziren with disdain, but there was a hint of worry on her proud face. In fact, she was very clear about the difficulty of this test. As long as they lost control of their hearts, they would be finished. "We're not far from the sea," Xiaobai reminded. Everyone looked. They were only 100 meters away from the sea. If it didn't wake up, they would really fall into the sea. However, they had returned to their original state. Perhaps they could prevent this from happening. Everyone's hearts were beating fast. No one knew if they could break through the shackles of their hearts. Soon, Di Xiaofeng also woke up. He was still a bit afraid. This test is quite scary. Even the test of one's mind wouldn't be like this. After noticing that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had passed, Di Xiaofeng sighed. "I didn't expect your minds to be so firm. You saw through everything so quickly." "Big brother, in fact, we also just woke up." Di Beichun smiled. "This place is so strange." Di Xiaofeng looked around. "I think this place might be the legendary Bitter Sea Abyss." However, after saying this, Di Xiaofeng noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were calm. "Am I wrong?" "Big brother, our thoughts are actually the same as yours." Di Beichun nodded. "We also think that this might be the Bitter Sea Abyss." Hearing this, Di Xiaofeng suddenly understood. Although there are no records of the Bitter Sea Abyss in the ancient books, the scene in front of us and what we just experienced is very fitting to the name of the Bitter Sea Abyss. However, this kind of psychological barrier was often the hardest to overcome. I think the reason why no one has been able to obtain the inheritance of the Bitter Sea Abyss is because the psychological barrier is too difficult, because no one could pass through it. And the weather here is so strange. Over time, no one came here, and the news of the Bitter Sea Abyss was gradually lost. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. This kind of inner test was what everyone was most unwilling to accept. Perhaps this was also the reason why many people were in the Two Abyss, but not the Abyss of Misery. Soon, Bailey Yinyan also woke up. Chapter 6306. Seeing that everyone was gradually waking up, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others relaxed a little. Now, their beliefs were undoubtedly much stronger than before. Since everyone could figure out one by one, they believed that even if Ling and Mo Yunjue spent a little more time, they would definitely figure it out. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun knew very well that the reason why Ling had fallen into such negative emotions was definitely because of the incident between Bai Yunjiao and He Xinjun. Even if there were still many things that she could not remember clearly because of the existence of the seal, just these things alone were enough to make her feel very painful. Once she was immersed in such pain, it was really too difficult to see through everything in a short period of time. The two gradually moved forward, getting closer and closer to the surface of the sea. Bai Yinshe walked directly to the front of the sea because he was worried. He wondered if they could save Ling, and Mo Yunjue if they really fell into the sea. However, when Bai Yinshe was about 10 meters away from the sea, he found that he could not take another step forward at all. It was as if there was an invisible wall blocking his way. Noticing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' hearts sank. They knew that the situation was definitely not that simple. Once they could not break through this barrier, it meant that they could not save Mo Yunjue and He Xinjun at all. Will they be okay? Bailey Yinshe furrowed his brows, his eyes filled with worry. The abyss of the Sea of Misery was full of strangeness. Even now, they still did not understand what kind of existence it was. Logically speaking, in the past, when the two great abyss tried to break through, even if they failed, they would not lose their lives. Could the situation be as bad as we think? Xiaohei could not help but ask. I can't be sure. Although they're called the Three Great Abyss, It's obvious that the abyss of the Sea of Misery is different from the other two great abyss. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes narrowed. Perhaps the abyss of the Sea of Misery in front of them could not be judged by their previous experience. 50 meters, 30 meters, 10 meters. Everyone watched as Ling and Mo Yunjue got closer and closer to the surface of the sea, while they were all blocked by the restriction. Damn it! Can we break this restriction? Xiren could not help but ask. Hearing this, Deep Bachin pondered and said, "We can give it a try, but the possibility of success is not very high." Boom! Everyone used their strongest attacks to attack the restriction. The dazzling attribute power emitted a dazzling brilliance, but the situation before them was somewhat beyond everyone's expectations. Normally, when he used his strength to attack the restriction, even if he couldn't break the restriction, he would at least cause a ripple on it. However, when their attacks landed on the restriction, it was as if they were directly absorbed. There was no movement at all. It was as if they had not attacked at all. How could this be? Shangguaning Ying was astonished. This was the first time they had seen such a restriction. Bang! When Xiren did not believe it and tried again, he found that the situation was still the same as before. What a strange restriction. Everyone's heart sank even more. If they could not break the restriction, it meant that they could only break the shackles in their hearts through themselves. However, there were only 5 meters left. If they did not wake up, it would really be over. Linga, wake up! Bailey Yin Che shouted anxiously. 4 meters. Chapter 6307. Linger Yinju, wake up! No one knew if their calls would work or if she could hear them in such a state of mind. But no matter what it was, they had to give it a try. 3 meters. Linger's footsteps suddenly stopped. Under everyone's gaze, she quickly returned to her original appearance. Seeing this, everyone quietly breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, everyone called out to Mo Yunjue in unison. Perhaps this method was really effective. Yinju, wake up! Don't be misled by this voice. Everything you've done is meaningful. Everyone shouted. With a distance of 3 meters, even if they moved very slowly, they would fall to the bottom of the sea in the blink of an eye. Linger looked at her surroundings in a daze. She completely did not understand why she was suddenly standing here. When she saw Mo Yunjue gradually walking into the sea, a trace of worry appeared on her face. Linger, try and see if you can hold Yinju, Di Bei-chan suddenly said. Hearing this, Linger immediately reached out to grab Mo Yunjue, but found that there was a layer of invisible force blocking her movements. No, there's a restriction between me and Yunju, Linger said anxiously. 3 steps, 2 steps, 1 step. There was only a distance of 1 step left. Everyone's hearts were in their mouths. A feeling of nervousness and fear spread. Along the way, they had always been a team. They had never thought that one day someone might leave their team. This was something they could not accept at all. Yinju, knowing you has always been something we're happy about. The pain of the past is over. You still have us in the future. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the tall but lonely figure, and there was a trace of heartache in her voice. She had always been grateful to Mo Yunjue. Whether it was the help in the past or the experience they had now, he had always done his best to help her. Let go. As long as you continue moving forward, you will be able to forget all the pain. The ancient voice carried a boundless attraction as it circled around Mo Yunjue's mind. Ever since he was young, he had always been in pain. Even if he was the young master of the Heaven Slaughter Pavilion, he would rather not have this identity. Even he himself found the life of a walking corpse laughable. What was the point of continuing such a life? If abandoning everything could relieve him of his pain, then he was willing to abandon everything. At this moment, a gentle, nervous, and pained voice entered his ears. Mo Yunjue's body suddenly trembled. That devastatingly beautiful face appeared in his mind, like a grain of sunlight that illuminated the darkness in his heart. Scenes of the past appeared in his mind. In the past, he had indeed lived a very painful life, but ever since he met Bailey Hongzhuang, many things had become less important. Even if she liked someone else, he didn't care, because liking someone was his own business. As long as he could watch from afar, it was an indescribable happiness for him. He didn't regret it. Or rather, he used to regret it, but everything changed after he met Bailey Hongzhuang. He no longer regretted it. Even if all the hardships he had encountered in the past could be exchanged for meeting her, it was worth it. Yes, it was worth it. Chapter 63:08. Yunju. Everyone could not help but cry out in alarm. When they saw Yunju take a step forward, everyone's hearts were in their mouths. Once he fell into the sea, they did not dare to imagine the consequences. Bang! The sound of someone falling into the sea rang out, splashing water in all directions. For a brief moment, everyone's expression fell into a daze. They could not believe that such a thing could really happen, nor could they accept it. Yunju! Everyone cried out in alarm, their faces pale and nervous, revealing a sense of helplessness. Bang, bang, bang! At that moment, everyone attacked the barrier with all their might. They could not believe that the person who had been traveling with them would leave the group here. Everyone was stupefied, with an indescribable panic. They were instinctively unwilling to believe the scene in front of them. Damn it, what kind of lousy place is this? When Zion smashed his fist fiercely on the barrier. No matter how they attacked, the barrier remained unmoved, without any ripples. They watched helplessly as Mo Yunjue fell into the sea, but there was nothing they could do to help. This feeling of helplessness was so sullen that it was driving them crazy. There must be a way. There must be a way. Bailey Hongzhuang forced herself to calm down. The more anxious she was, the more blank her mind became. However, at a time like this, it was too difficult to calm down. How could I die so easily? Suddenly, a cold voice with a hint of laughter rang out from the front. Hearing this voice, everyone was stunned. They were pleasantly surprised and looked in front of them in disbelief, afraid that they had made a mistake in their judgment. Was I hallucinating just now? Shangguan Yingying looked at the crowd with uncertainty. She had indeed heard this voice, but she was not sure if it was real or not. Bailey Hongzhuang also looked in front of her nervously. She and Shangguan Yingying had heard this voice as well. In the next moment, the tall black figure suddenly jumped out from the sea and appeared in front of everyone's line of sight. Seeing this scene, everyone's faces simultaneously revealed a deep sense of surprise and joy. Yunju, you're all right. You scared us to death. What the hell is going on? The moment Mo Yunjue got up, everyone discovered that the original restriction had disappeared, and they were able to smoothly rush to the front. Noticing the worry and nervousness on everyone's faces, Mo Yunjue also felt a sense of warmth in his heart. He had actually been bewitched by those negative voices and had actually forgotten that he had already obtained many things that he had never obtained before. Thank you for waking me up. I woke up the last moment. A rare smile appeared on Mo Yunjue's face, like a melting glacier, instantly illuminating everyone's hearts. At this moment, Bailey Yunyin and the others finally realized that Mo Yunjue was actually so good-looking when he smiled. This kind of clean smile was enough to stir one's heart at a glance. Not many women could resist this kind of charm. When Zion saw that Shangguan Yingying was staring at Mo Yunjue with a dazzling smile on her face, he couldn't help but stand in front of Shangguan Yingying and pull Mo Yunjue to the side. Chapter 63:09. After Mo Yunjue returned safely, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the situation was not as bad as they thought. As long as everyone was still together, that was the best. This place is too strange. If we're not careful, we won't know when we'll lose our lives. Should we leave this place? Shangguan Yingying's face was full of worry. Recalling the previous situation, she couldn't help but feel scared. If Mo Yunjue didn't wake up at the last moment, perhaps their team would have an eternal regret. Didn't they say that no one has been able to obtain the inheritance of the Bitter Sea Abyss? It must be because this place is too strange. Everyone fell into deep thought. Everything that they had seen so far was strange. It was far more strange than they imagined. No one knew if they would run into a trap and lose their lives just like that. However, no one was willing to leave just like that. Let's look around first. The Bitter Sea Abyss has been missing for so many years. It's normal that no one has obtained the inheritance. Di Xiaofeng's face was serious. As far as he knew, the Bitter Sea Abyss had disappeared for too many years. In these years, countless cultivators had tried to break through the other two abysses. Some places that had long disappeared from everyone's sight naturally couldn't be successfully broken through. They had the opportunity to come here, and it was a pity to leave just like that. That's right. Let's take a look for now. Di Beichen comforted everyone. Since we're already here, no matter what, we have to know what kind of existence the Bitter Sea Abyss is. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others nodded. It was rare for them to come here, and they were unwilling to give up just like that. According to the situation on the map, the final location marked is the sea area in front. Should we go take a look? Bailey Hongzhuang asked for everyone's opinion. Although there was only a vast sea in front of them, she believed that the mark on the map would not be wrong. At least along the way, there was no problem with the mark on the map. It was just that this map didn't introduce the situation of the Bitter Sea Abyss. However, she was grateful to the owner of the map. If they hadn't noticed the small words on the map, they might have arrived here long ago. With their cultivation at that time, facing such a situation, only death awaited them. Sitting on the small boat, everyone slowly rushed towards the location marked on the map. Along the way, everyone's speed was not fast. They looked around vigilantly, afraid that something would happen. Fortunately, the journey was calm and peaceful. There wasn't even the slightest bit of wind and waves. It was surprisingly smooth. In this vast sea, a small boat was particularly conspicuous. There were no signs of human habitation nearby, and there were no demon beasts at the bottom of the sea. Everything here seemed to be still. If it wasn't for their appearance that broke the peace, perhaps this place would continue to be like this. This should be the location marked on the map. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. As soon as these words came out, everyone's face revealed a trace of confusion. There's clearly nothing here. How could it be here? Chapter 63:10. Indeed, it doesn't make sense, but this is the place marked on the map. Bailey Hongzhuang's sweet voice was filled with certainty. After carefully comparing the map, she gave a definite answer. Seeing this, everyone could not help but carefully observe the nearby situation. However, they really could not find anything special in such a vast sea. Could it be that too much time has passed, so the inheritance has disappeared? When Xiren voiced his suspicions, no one knew how long this map had been drawn. Perhaps someone had already been here before them. Let's go down to the bottom of the sea to take a look. Di Beichun suddenly said. Hearing this, everyone was slightly stunned. They saw Di Beichun's figure flashed and directly jumped into the sea. As Di Beichun jumped into the sea, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others looked at each other. Without further delay, they quickly jumped into the sea. Usually, the sea water always had a faint fishy smell. However, the sea water here was different. It did not have any smell, just like pure water. After jumping into the sea, everyone did not see any difference and could only continue to swim deeper. However, as everyone swam down for a distance, the scene in front of them had completely shocked everyone. A huge tower sat at the bottom of the sea. It was so huge that it was like a castle. Even if it was just the top of the tower, the range was not ordinary, let alone the bottom. The entire pagoda was gray in color. Chains that were thicker than a person's body locked the entire pagoda, as if a sinner had been imprisoned here for a long time. It emitted a heavy and terrifying aura. No one thought that the real abyss of the sea of misery would look like this. The terrifying chains revealed an indescribable heaviness. This was a building that could not be described with words. It was spectacular beyond one's imagination. It was clearly located in the sea, but it was still brand new, as if it had not been eroded by the sea at all. Compared to it, the other two abysses were too far apart. Oh my God, there is such an existence in the world. Di Xiaofeng and the others were all shocked. They looked at such a magnificent and heavy building in disbelief. It was the same feeling that he had when he first saw the brilliant shrine and the darkness shrine. The difference was that it was a kind of worship and faith, while the one in front of him was a complete shock. Is this the real sea of bitterness? Bailey Hongzhuang muttered to herself. This kind of building had a kind of power that made one's heart palpitate. To think that such a shocking building would gradually be forgotten by the people of the upper realms. This shouldn't be the case. Di Xiaofeng couldn't help but sigh. He didn't know how this building was built, but its majestic grandeur was destined to be a shocking existence. It was a pity that such a place would gradually disappear from the sight of the world with the passage of time. The Bitter Sea Abyss is located at the bottom of the sea. Its name is really appropriate. Di Beichun said slowly. The abyss of the Sea of Bitterness was just like its name. It was located at the bottom of the sea. So this sea is called the Sea of Bitterness? Everyone was slightly startled. No one knew the name of this sea, but the Sea of Misery was really fitting. Chapter 63:11. Everyone looked at each other. They didn't understand the situation either. Usually, this kind of situation would be an unpardonable evil. However, the Bitter Sea Abyss looked so quiet and solemn. It didn't seem to be related to evil. However, the chains wouldn't exist for no reason. There must be a reason for it to appear here. Could it be that their judgment was wrong? Just then, Di Xiaofeng's voice suddenly sounded. I didn't expect the Bitter Sea Abyss to appear here. This voice was different from his usual voice. It was low and hoarse. Noticing this, everyone couldn't help but look over. They didn't understand what was going on. However, when they looked over, they found that Di Xiaofeng's eyes had turned red. Almost immediately, everyone realized that the one who spoke wasn't Di Xiaofeng, but the nine-tailed inferno fox. After a short moment of surprise, everyone wasn't too nervous. Di Xiaofeng and the nine-tailed inferno fox had already formed a contract. Therefore, the nine-tailed inferno fox wouldn't harm him. You know about the Bitter Sea Abyss? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. The nine-tailed inferno fox nodded. The Bitter Sea Abyss itself has a very strong power. It's a place that even cultivators from the immortal region want to reach. Actually, the three abyss are filled with evil. The other two abyss are filled with blood, power, violence, and even cruelty. To mainstream cultivators, the existence of the three abyss isn't a good place. However, it's undeniable that if you want to increase your strength, this kind of environment will allow you to become stronger in the shortest time possible. At the same time, the number of cultivators who die in the abyss is even more terrifying. This is also the origin of the word abyss. Hearing the nine-tailed inferno fox's introduction, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others finally understood. Originally, they didn't pay much attention to the names of the three abyss. Although they felt that the names were very strange, they didn't know that there was so much meaning behind it. The Bitter Sea Abyss is different from the demonic abyss. It exists to test a person's heart. You've already experienced it before. Isn't it very scary? The nine-tailed inferno fox chuckled. There was a hint of mockery in her laughter. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others nodded. That kind of interrogation of one's heart was indeed very difficult, because it would make all problems unavoidable, making it impossible for you to avoid them. This is just a small part of it. In the past, the Bitter Sea Abyss was the same as the other two Great Abyss. Many cultivators came here to pass the test and obtain great power. However, this place is far more difficult than the other two abysses. Didn't you ask me why the Bitter Sea Abyss is locked with chains? The nine-tailed inferno fox asked. Everyone nodded in agreement. This was something that made them curious. That's because too many people have lost their lives here, or because there's an eternal demon in their hearts. The shackles of the heart were far more terrifying than the shackles of the body. The cultivators who failed in the other two abysses only needed to recuperate for a period of time to recover from their injuries. Even if it would delay some of his cultivation progress, it wouldn't have much of an impact. However, it was not easy for cultivators who failed in the Bitter Sea Abyss to escape unscathed. Chapter 63:12. Hearing the nine-tailed inferno fox's words, the scene gradually appeared in everyone's mind. Demons dancing wildly. That was probably the real demons dancing wildly. If most of the cultivators who came here turned into lunatics, then the scene would be extremely terrifying. It's because of this that the bitter sea abyss was locked to the depths of the bitter sea by countless shackles. In the past, the bitter sea abyss was located on an island and was much more conspicuous than the other two abysses. Everyone also understood, but in the face of such a situation, everyone's mood was very complicated. So, the reason why the bitter sea abyss was lost was not because it was hard to find, but because someone did it on purpose. All the puzzles were solved at that moment. Compared to so many cultivators falling into madness, it was better to treat it as if it never existed. Although it cut off the possibility of training an expert, it also prevented a greater loss. The bitter sea abyss's hurdle is so difficult. The reward after passing it must be very shocking, right? Bachun suddenly asked. When he said that, everyone's eyes lit up. No matter if it was the murderous aura or the blood aura, they were both extremely powerful existences. If it was an ordinary power, it would not be of much use as their strength increased. However, the effect of these two powers had always been there. Even if it was reduced slightly, the effect was still very huge. The difficulty of the bitter sea abyss increased by so much. Its aura must be extremely powerful. That's right. The inheritance of the bitter sea abyss is a very powerful existence. Nine-tailed Inferno, Fox nodded slightly. Just like how its test is to face one's own heart and strengthen one's own beliefs, its inheritance is also a related existence. This power is not used on others, but on the cultivator himself. That is to see through all falsehoods. Even Nine-tailed Inferno Fox could not help but reveal a yearning expression when talking about this power. See through all falsehoods? Bailey Hongzhuang was startled. Does it mean that the illusory realm has no effect in front of the cultivator who obtains the inheritance? Illusory realm is just one of the many falsehoods. As long as you obtain the inheritance, no matter what kind of illusory realm it will not affect you at all. Not only that, any psychological test is meaningless to you. You can see through all falsehoods, and you can even judge people more accurately. Everyone couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Although this didn't sound like a very strong power and wouldn't be of much help to one's combat strength, this kind of ability was often the most important to a cultivator. Seeing through all falsehoods. If they had such an ability, they would not have been suppressed by the Azure Demon earlier. In the face of some terrifying auras, they would not change their minds because of the other party's strength. This means that the aura of the strong will no longer be of any use to you. You will strengthen your strongest belief, and all illusions and aura suppression will no longer have any meaning. Actually, these are just means. The most important thing is that your heart will become unprecedentedly strong. The path of cultivation was long. In the early stages, one cultivated the body, and in the later stages, one cultivated the mind. As long as your hearts are unshakable, it is only a matter of time before you raise your cultivation. Chapter 63:13. Everyone fell into a state of shock. Even if they only heard about it, they couldn't help but feel their blood boiling. This kind of power was enough to make many cultivators go crazy. There's actually such a power in the world. Mo Yunjue's expression was complicated. Every experience would make them understand how insignificant they were. The inheritances of the three great abyss were very powerful, far beyond their imagination. They couldn't imagine where these powers came from, and who had such a terrifying power to imprison such a powerful bitter sea abyss. There's one more thing that you might not know. What is it? If you obtain the power of the three great abyss, these powers will fuse together to become the strongest power. Nine-tailed Inferno Fox's lips curled up in an interested arc. This happened before, and only one person had truly done it. But it was really a long time ago. We only know that it was a graceful figure, and his strength was enough to make everyone gasp in shock. Since then, no one else had done it, and the news of the three great powers fusing also came from this person. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bachun looked at each other. They already had the blood aura field and the killing aura field, and vaguely felt that these two powers were similar. Now that they understood this point, they also believed that it was definitely true. So there's such a connection between the three great abyss. Xiren sighed. No wonder they're called the Three Great Abyss. If Hong Zhuang and Beichen can also obtain the inheritance of the Bittersea Abyss, wouldn't that be amazing? Shanghuan Yingying's eyes lit up. Among all of them, only Beichen and Hong Zhuang had obtained the inheritance of the Two Great Abyss. The inheritance of the Third Great Abyss was the most difficult, and it would be very difficult to obtain the inheritance. If you can obtain it, it's naturally great. But before you try, you'd better think carefully. If you fail, you might not be able to bear the consequences. Nine-tailed Inferno Fox's gaze fell on Di Beichun. Don't forget your promise. You still have to follow me to another place. Hearing this, Di Beichun nodded. Don't worry, I'll always remember this. So, it's best if you don't go in. If you go crazy, then everything I've done will be meaningless. Looking at the serious look on the nine-tailed Inferno Fox's face, everyone finally understood the reason why he introduced so many things. In fact, after understanding all of this, everyone's hearts were beating like drums. If they didn't know, they would have definitely entered directly. However, now that they understood so much, once they entered, they might also become people who lost their minds and ultimately die in the sea of misery. Why don't we give up? Bailey Union's face revealed a trace of fear. Originally, she didn't think of anything, but now that she understood, she felt that this place was not just a little scary. If they gave up, they might lose something. But if they entered, they might lose everything. Di Xiaofeng had already returned to his original appearance. Although the nine-tailed Inferno Fox was using his body to speak, he still understood everything clearly. Shoo! Di Xiaofeng gestured for Bailey Yunyan to keep quiet, and Bailey Yunyan immediately stopped talking. In such a situation, everyone needed some time to think. Chapter 63:14. Compared to the bloodiness and cruelty of the other two abysses, she felt that the original intention of the Sea of Misery's existence was not to drive countless cultivators into madness, but only to strengthen the cultivators' beliefs. However, the cultivators' hearts were far from being as strong as the Sea of Misery thought, which was why there were so many problems. Previously, when she passed the test on the coast, she felt that she had gained quite a lot. After entering, she might be able to hone her willpower and face her heart. However, if she could not bear it, it would be extremely painful. When their hearts were unable to bear such pain, they might lose their lives. Silence. A long silence. Everyone just stood there quietly and looked at the majestic pagoda in front of them. They were struggling in their hearts. They had spent so much effort to come here and found the long-lost Sea of Misery. If they just stood in front of the door, they would be too unwilling. However, going in required too much courage. At this moment, a distant and ancient voice echoed from the Sea of Misery. Unlike when they were on the coast, they did not know where the voice came from. Now, they clearly knew that the voice came from the pagoda. It was a voice that they did not understand at all. It sounded like a chant, but the magical language was something that they had never come into contact with before. It carried a special power. Hearing the magical voice, everyone felt their hearts tremble and their bodies were baptized. Unconsciously, everyone sat down at the entrance of the Sea of Misery. They closed their eyes and emptied their minds, quietly listening to the mysterious voice. All of their distracting thoughts had disappeared at this moment, leaving only nothingness and purity. They sat there for a long time, and no one knew how long they had been sitting there. When Bailey Hongzhuang woke up, she felt that her body was a little stiff, as if she had been in the same position for a long time. The door of the Sea of Misery had been opened unknowingly. Looking at the heavy door, she only felt a strong attraction inviting her in. Her footsteps unconsciously pulsed, and she slowly walked through the door. Walking into the first floor, Bailey Hongzhuang found that the layout was very different from what she had imagined, but it also seemed like it should be like this. The simplicity of this place was vividly displayed. There was no dazzling brilliance or dazzling brilliance. Everything here seemed to have returned to its origin, bringing with it a simple and unadorned power. Simple wooden chairs and simple and casual furnishings. However, it was precisely these things that they would not have taken a fancy to on a normal day that appeared grand and simple here. At a glance, the main hall was empty except for some decorations. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes turned to the stairs in front of her. It was said that the Bittersea Abyss was not like the other two abyss that had a special place to break through. The Bittersea Abyss only existed for one purpose, and that was to break through. As long as he could reach the top of the tower, it meant that he had successfully passed the trial. However, after so many years, other than one person, no one else had been able to reach the top of the tower. Bailey Hongzhuang thought about what kind of test there would be on this floor, but found that nothing happened, so she walked directly in the direction of the stairs. Chapter 63:15. Could it be that, because the Bittersea Abyss has disappeared for so many years, even this level has become different? Bailey Hongzhuang was a little puzzled. She thought that the first level would be very difficult, but she did not expect to go directly to the second floor. However, Bailey Hongzhuang soon understood that things were not as she thought. It was just that the first floor did not have an assessment. As soon as she walked to the second floor, Bailey Hongzhuang found that the scene in front of her changed. Familiar and ferocious faces appeared in front of her. Bailey Yuyin, Xin Yuan Hung, all of her former opponents had appeared in front of her. These people had been the stumbling blocks on her path, and now they had all appeared. They all look down on you and want to kill you. Now that you've become stronger, you should kill all of them. These bitches, they think of ways to bully you and humiliate you. You should kill all of them. In a world where the strong are respected, these people are just cheap lives. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the ferocious faces in front of her. In addition to some familiar faces, there were also some unfamiliar faces. Vaguely, she also remembered the faces of these people. Whether it was in Fengbo Country, Tiangang Sect, or even Penglai Palace, these people had mocked her and concluded that she would die miserably. A lot of messy rumors were spread by these people. If it weren't for these guys, she wouldn't have been criticized all the time. Bailey Hongzhuang, go to hell. Xiao So stabbed directly at Bailey Hongzhuang. Her ferocious and terrifying appearance showed that she wanted to kill her. You stole my man and destroyed my family. I must kill you today. Bailey Hongzhuang held the sharp sword in her hand and moved directly to meet her. There should be an end between them. Ding, ding, ding. Their figures moved, and the two directly confronted each other. Bailey Hongzhuang's figure was as fast as lightning. Her sword rose and fell without mercy. Chi! The long sword pierced Xiao Sou's chest, producing a dull sound. After Xiao Sou's death, Han Shilling appeared in front of her again. Beichen will always be mine. You don't deserve to be with him. If I kill you, Beichen will be with me forever. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. She didn't want to say anything more to this woman. All this time, she had already given in quite a bit, but Han Shilling had always been pushing her bottom line. Since it was destined that only one of them could survive, then she could only take action. One by one, her enemies fell in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. Fresh blood splattered onto her fair face. There was a faint smell of blood, but it stimulated her heart. Kill them all. Kill them all. This thought screamed madly in her heart. Every single one of them deserves to die. Unknowingly, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes had turned red with bloodlust. The sharp sword in her hand continued to wave as she faced the disgusting faces. It was as if she would only be able to truly calm down after killing everyone. However, in the process of killing, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but recall her time in the Magic Tower. She had experienced a similar scene. She had never been a kind person and would never use the word kind to describe herself. Because in this world where the strong preyed on the weak, kindness was a luxury. Chapter 63:16. She saved people and also killed people. She would never be merciful to those who crossed her bottom line or her true enemies. However, how many people in this world would find her an eyesore? Because she had become stronger, because she had obtained better cultivation resources, there were bound to be many people who would gossip and secretly curse her. She had never taken these people to heart. This was because this was the most common phenomenon. No matter who it was, this kind of situation would happen. Facing these people, she could directly ignore them and act as if she had never seen them. If she had to kill everyone who had opinions about her, wouldn't she be exhausted to death? She was not a dictator and did not mind others having opinions about her. As long as they did not cross her bottom line and did not touch her reverse scale, she could act as if she had never seen them. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang stopped her sword. Looking at the blood dripping from the tip of the sword, the rationality that she had lost gradually came back. In the next moment, she realized that the ferocious faces in front of her had disappeared and the empty second floor of the demonic training tower had returned. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang realized that her emotions had unknowingly been infected and she had forgotten where she was. The power of the abyss of misery is really terrifying, Bailey Hongzhuang murmured. She had always thought that she had to stay calm, and no matter what the situation was, she should not be infected by the power here. However, from the moment she walked in, her emotions had been infected. Now that she thought about it, all of this was clearly a very fake scene. Those people who had already died would not appear in front of her, but she could not see through all of this. Under the influence of the strange power of the abyss of misery, all of the impossible situations would become reality in one's mind. It was a reality that one could not question at all. For a moment, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that her emotions had been completely infected and she only wanted to kill everything. If she had to kill everyone who was dissatisfied with her, how tiring would it be for her to live her life? What's more, envy, jealousy, and hatred were emotions that humans were born with and could never be eliminated. If he had to kill everything just because of this, he would be reduced to a killing machine. I finally understand why so many people lose their rationality in such a situation. Once they can't get out of it, they will forever be trapped in such emotions. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed inwardly. Fortunately, her rationality finally pulled her back to reality. Looking at the staircase that led to the third floor, she did not immediately go up. Although everything that happened just now was only in her mind, she felt exceptionally exhausted. She did not know when, but her back was already drenched in sweat. I think I should rest here for a while before continuing. Bailey Hongzhuang was afraid. The second level was already very scary. The remaining levels would be even scarier. If she wasn't in a good state, the chances of her failing would be even higher. She couldn't let that happen. While Bailey Hongzhuang was trying to break through, Di Beichun was also trying to break through. However, even if the two of them were in the same place, they could not see each other at all. Chapter 63:17. Bailey Hongzhuang had rested on the second level for 2 whole days. The feeling of experiencing everything was difficult to describe with words. Only she knew how difficult it was. She needed to completely digest all these emotions before she could return to her best state of mind. Digesting these emotions would require her to think carefully about every detail and the reason why her emotions had collapsed. However, this problem itself was very difficult to understand. When faced with enemies, killing them without hesitation had always been her principle. If one does not remove the roots when cutting the weeds, they would grow again when the spring breeze blows. Once those fellows were at death's door, they would definitely find ways to deal with them in some dark corner. It was very likely that they would cause them great losses. Hence, she did not think that there was anything wrong with being ruthless towards these people. However, she could not kill everyone because of this. Everyone would have their own way of measuring the scale of this. Xiaohei noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang had not made it to the third level for a long time and understood how terrifying this trial was. Actually, when its master was undergoing the trial, it had not been able to see anything at all. It also did not know what kind of situation its master was in. After resting for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes filled with determination. Since she was already here, she must make use of this opportunity to train herself properly. If she could really succeed in breaking through this trial, she would welcome a new lease of life. However, even if she failed, as long as she could escape unscathed, it would be a great help to her. Then, Bailey Hongzhuang made her way to the third level of the pagoda. The scene before her eyes became familiar, and her memories were traced back to the past. Hong Zhuang, that bunch of old fogies kept saying that the name grandfather had given you isn't good. That's because they have no taste at all. The old man, who was over 60 years old, sat in front of Bailey Hong Zhuang as he fumed with rage. His face was filled with dissatisfaction and resentment. Grandfather, actually, this name itself is quite strange. Bailey Hong Zhuang probed. How is it strange? The old man's face stiffened. Isn't this name easy to pronounce? You have no idea how happy your grandmother was when she had given you this name. What does this have to do with Grandma? Back then, when I married your grandmother, it was surely Hong Zhuang. However, your grandmother was proud and arrogant. She felt that it couldn't be done. She had to be Bailey Hong Zhuang. However, I still married her back then. In the years that followed, sometimes she would talk about it, until our family finally gave birth to you, a little girl. I gave you the name Bailey Hong Zhuang. From then on, your grandma never talked about it again. She likes you the most. A kind smile appeared on Bailey Jingyu's face. I think this name sounds good. It suits my precious granddaughter the best. Grandpa, I like this name too. Bailey Hong Zhuang smiled. Unconsciously, Bailey Hong Zhuang had a bright and warm smile on her face. That was her carefree time. However, before she could be happy for long, the situation before her eyes suddenly changed. Hong Zhuang, we've put so much effort into cultivating you, but you failed to live up to our expectations and caused the entire family to decline. It's because you disappeared with the inheritance that we couldn't defeat the other families. Do you know how many cultivators from the family have fallen because of you? Chapter 63:18. The questions were like sharp blades that pierced Bailey Hong Zhuang's heart. It was dripping with blood, and the pain was unbearable. It's not like that. All explanations seemed feeble and powerless under such circumstances. Bailey Hong Zhuang's face was deathly pale, and the guilt in her heart all this time had completely exploded. The Bailey family had declined for so many years. Even if he had tried her best to make the current Bailey family stronger, over the years, too many people had been hurt because of her mistakes. When she had fallen, the situation in the family must have been very chaotic at that time. Perhaps no one could understand why she had done this. With her strength, as long as she had cultivated well in the family, her future would definitely not be bad. However, it was precisely because she had arrogantly wanted to go out and make a name for herself that she had lost her little life in the end. Why won't you listen to us obediently? Hong Zhuang, you've really disappointed grandfather. Looking at the disappointed Bailey Hong Zhuang in front of her, tears welled up in her eyes. Grandfather, I'm sorry. Bailey Jingyu turned around indifferently, and his majestic voice was filled with iciness. What's the use of saying these words now? What I regret the most is handing over the position of the family head to you. The sky seemed to have fallen into darkness at this moment. Endless darkness enveloped Bailey Hong Zhuang, and an unspeakable pain pierced her heart. She had always known that this was her fault, and that her family would never forgive her. Master, master, wake up. Xiaohei looked at Bailey Hong Zhuang's pained and desperate appearance, and its face was full of worry. It had been with its master for so long, but this was the first time it had seen its master reveal such a desperate expression. Even it could empathize with this kind of bone-deep pain. What kind of test was this to cause its master to fall into such emotions? Master. However, no matter how Xiaohei tried to wake Bailey Hong Zhuang up, it was of no use. Xiaohei stared at Bailey Hong Zhuang in a daze, and its heart sank into sorrow. Its master should not be like this. She was usually smiling like a flower, and she should be like this. This kind of test was too cruel for anyone. Some were quite cool. As long as you didn't think about it, you wouldn't feel pain. However, in this abyss of the sea of bitterness, it forced you to face the pain. It even tore open the scabs and looked directly at the bloody wounds. Bailey Hong Zhuang fell into a long period of grief. She wanted to disappear from this world just like that. She didn't want to think or do anything. Perhaps she could be completely liberated. Outside the abyss of the sea of bitterness, Shangwan Yingying looked at Xiren beside her and said, Xiren, don't you intend to go in and try your luck? When Xiren shook his head slightly. Although the reward is very tempting, the success rate is too low. He had already experienced it once before. Although he felt that his heart had become clearer when he thought about it carefully, the whole process was still very frightening. I don't have the confidence to break through these stages, so I might as well not go in. He was very clear about his situation. If he could withdraw from this stage, even if he failed, then so be it. It was just like how he had failed in the demonic tower. He would definitely give it a try. However, facing the abyss of the sea of bitterness, he could not try. This was because he knew very well that his chances of success were too small. Chapter 63:19. Hearing Xiren's words, Shangguan Yingying nodded slightly. I also feel that this test is too terrifying. I definitely won't succeed. Actually, most people won't succeed. Choosing to give up at this time isn't a shameful decision. Di Xiaofeng's face was calm. In fact, after the nine-tailed inferno fox introduced the situation here, he already had the intention to retreat. It wasn't because he didn't dare to try. If there was a 30% chance of success, he would be willing to try. However, reality was cruel. Not to mention 30%, there wasn't even 10%. To him, this wasn't a wise move. So even if there was a trace of unwillingness in his heart, he didn't walk through the door. Bailey Yinyan also let out a sigh of relief after seeing that Di Xiaofeng didn't go in. She was most worried that Di Xiaofeng would go in. The situation introduced by the nine-tailed inferno fox was too terrifying. If there were any problems, she wouldn't be able to accept it. But Hong Zhuang and Beichen both went in. Bailey Yinyan revealed a worried expression. In fact, she hoped that everyone would leave here. Since the Bitter Sea Abyss was imprisoned here, there must be a reason. In such a dangerous place, disappearing might not be a bad thing. This is also expected. Di Xiaofeng sighed. Long ago, he felt that Hong Zhuang and Beichen would go in. He wanted to say a few words to persuade them, but in the end, he didn't say it. Because Hong Zhuang and Beichen were different from them. They had already obtained the inheritance of the previous two Abyss, so the Bitter Sea Abyss was more attractive to them. Most importantly, in the previous test, Hong Zhuang and Beichen were the first to wake up. Their chances of success were much higher than theirs. I hope they can succeed. Mo Yunjue looked deeply at the spectacular abyss of the Bitter Sea in front of him. He didn't know which level they had reached. Yunjue, you don't plan to try? Shangguan Yingying wasn't surprised that the others didn't choose to try it. However, she was surprised when she noticed that Mo Yunjue didn't try it either. In her heart, Mo Yunjue had always been as outstanding as Beichen and Hong Zhuang. It was just like when Yunju had successfully passed through the demonic abyss. Hearing this, Mo Yunjue shook his head. With a complicated look in his eyes, he said, "If it were anything else, I would give it a try. But this psychological test is not suitable for me." His life in the past was too dark. In the abyss of the sea of bitterness, everything was magnified. Normally, it was already difficult for him to stop himself from thinking about those things. If he hadn't come to the upper realm with everyone else, his situation might have been even worse. In the past, he had wanted to destroy himself and everyone around him more than once. That kind of feeling did not feel good, and he did not want to experience it again. Most importantly, he felt that once he went in, he would not be able to come out again. Everyone nodded. Yunju's life in the past was not easy. The shackles in his heart were more serious than any of them. Yunju, even if you don't enter the Bitter Sea Abyss, your future achievements will definitely surpass others, Di Xiaofeng suddenly said. This was what he had always felt. Even if Yunju rarely spoke, he had the characteristics of a powerhouse. Chapter 63:20. Following Di Xiaofeng's words, Xiren and the others all nodded. There was more than one path to cultivation. Sometimes, with shackles in the heart, one step forward would be firmer. Mo Yunjue's gaze swept across everyone's faces and then revealed a faint smile. You don't have to comfort me. I won't be disappointed because of this. He was very clear about his situation. He wouldn't take the risk to try something that was destined to fail. Looking at Mo Yunjue's indifferent and calm appearance, everyone was slightly startled and then revealed a smile. In fact, in their hearts, this wasn't comfort at all. It was their heartfelt words. The cold darkness enveloped Bailey Hongzhuang. The whole world was strangely cold, without the slightest warmth, as if it was gradually freezing her. At this moment, a struggling thought appeared in Bailey Hongzhuang's mind. Scenes from when she was young appeared in her mind. Hongzhuang, it's good to study hard, but don't work too hard. Bailey Hongzhuang lovingly stroked Bailey Hongzhuang's head. Grandpa only wants you to live happily. Grandpa, is it okay if I don't study well? It's okay. Bailey Jingyu smiled. You are Grandpa's precious granddaughter. No matter what you do in the future, even if it's wrong, you have to believe that Grandpa will never blame you or be angry with Hongzhuang. That warm smile was an eternal memory in her heart. Although the old man had a childish side, he was warm and tolerant most of the time. She remembered the many days when her grandfather taught her how to grow up. He was so tolerant and warm. Even if she really did something wrong, he wouldn't blame her. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes suddenly brightened. Her family would be sad and upset, but the people who loved her would only be sad because of her death. She was wrong. She was indeed wrong. Facing up to her mistakes and finding ways to make up for it was all she could do now. If she treated death as a release, then she would be doing nothing. She wouldn't even be able to make up for it. Kacha! The scene in front of her suddenly began to shatter. Kacha kacha! The sound of breaking continued to resound, and Bailey Hongzhuang found that she had returned to the third layer of the Bittersea Abyss. After seeing this familiar yet strange environment, she sat down on the ground weakly. It was too terrifying. This stage was truly too terrifying. She was so close to not being able to walk out of it forever. If she hadn't thought of that idea at the last moment, she would have been gradually frozen by the ice, and her heart would never have been able to walk out. Master, are you all right? Xiaohei rushed to Bailey Hongzhuang's side as soon as she saw Bailey Hongzhuang come out of the illusion. Her face was filled with worry. Previously, its heart had been hanging by a thread. It had a vague feeling that its master would never be able to walk out of it. Fortunately, Master still passed this stage in the end. Looking at the teary-eyed Xiaohei, Bailey Hongzhuang rubbed its little head and hugged it again. Don't worry, it's all right now. Master, this stage is really too scary. It's only the third stage, and it's already so difficult. I don't know what the next stages will be like. Chapter 63:21. They should take advantage of the fact that they were still able to escape unscathed. If this continued, they might have to stay here forever. Bailey Hongzhuang fell into silence. Every level was really terrifying. It was like endless self-abuse. This method was enough to break one's spirit. Even though she had successfully passed the level, her heart could not calm down for a long time. That indescribable sadness spread in her heart, making her feel at a loss. Xiaohei, I want to rest for a while. After a while, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Hearing this, Xiaohei quickly nodded. It did not dare to say anything else, for fear of disturbing Bailey Hongzhuang. Slowly closing her eyes, Bailey Hongzhuang did not cultivate. She was too tired now. All her emotions filled her mind, making it impossible for her to calm down and think about anything. Therefore, she only wanted to sleep quietly. Perhaps she would understand by then. Xiaohei quietly guarded by Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Through these 3 levels, it understood the power of the abyss of misery. Now, it only hoped that its master could think through everything and leave this place. Their lives were already good. Even if they did not obtain the inheritance of the abyss of misery, it would not affect them much. At the same time, Di Beichun was also sitting on the 3rd level of the abyss of misery. Although there was also some palpitations on his face, it was obvious that his situation was much better than Bailey Hongzhuang's. Xiaobai stayed by Di Beichun's side. Master, is this level really difficult? It's very difficult. Di Beichun nodded slightly. However, this level should be set according to a person's 7 emotions and 6 desires. The difficulty should not increase with each level. Instead, every cultivator has their own most difficult level. To me, this 3rd level is not as difficult as the 2nd level. I see. Xiaobai immediately understood. I wonder what the 4th level will be. Di Beichun smiled faintly. No matter what it is, I have to give it a try. However, I have to rest for a while. Time passed slowly, but Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun, who were in the abyss of the sea of bitterness, could no longer tell the passage of time. After each challenge, they needed to spend a lot of time to sort out their emotions. Outside the abyss, Imo, Yunjue, and the others waited patiently. Beichin and the others have already been in there for a month. I wonder how they're doing now. Shangguan and Yingying looked at the tightly shut door of the bitter sea abyss with a distressed expression. They didn't dare to enter, so naturally, it was impossible for them to understand the situation of Bailey Hongzhuang. It was this feeling of not being able to understand at all and being anxious that made people feel particularly helpless. Their minds were always filled with worries about various situations that could occur at any time. For us right now, no news is probably the best news, Di Xiaofeng said slowly. In fact, as time passed, they became very anxious. However, other than waiting patiently, there was no other way to find out. If they fail, will they come out? Bailey Yunyin couldn't help but ask. Then as long as they don't come out, it means that they are still challenging the level. Di Xiaofeng nodded slightly and said with a serious expression. The nine-tailed Inferno Fox said that all the cultivators who fail the level would not be killed. However, it is very likely that they would come out unconscious. Chapter 63:22. Now that you mention it, I feel a lot more at ease. With Beichin's ability, even if they fail, it shouldn't be a problem for them to escape unscathed. Ziren let out a sigh of relief. Since they grew up together, he had long regarded Beichin as his own brother. His heart had always been in suspense, afraid that he would encounter any bad situation. However, he was very clear about Di Beichin's talent. Since someone could escape unscathed, then Beichin and the others shouldn't have any problems. Di Xiaofeng nodded slightly, his heavy heart quietly relaxing a bit. I also think they'll be fine. In a month's time, I think they've at least reached the 3rd level. Shangguan and Yingying smiled. They're all working hard to improve, so we can't fall behind. Let's take advantage of this time to cultivate. Otherwise, when Beichin and the others succeed, they'll definitely surpass us by far. That's true. Zyra nodded. Beichin and Hongzhuang's cultivation speed is really amazing. If we don't speed up, we won't even be able to keep up with them. Letting go of the nervousness and worry in their hearts, everyone began to cultivate in peace. Although they were in the deep sea, with their current cultivation, there wouldn't be any problems even if they stayed here for a long time. Not only that, this sea of bitterness contained a special kind of pure energy. Perhaps it was a mysterious energy that could see through all illusions, allowing them to be able to concentrate when cultivating. This was a very strange feeling. Normally, they wouldn't even care about it when cultivating, but after truly feeling this difference, they found that in this environment, their cultivation speed was actually faster. Bailey Hongzhuang would rest for a long time after each breakthrough. During this time, her mood fluctuated the most. After transmigrating for such a long time, she had never faced so many problems. However, every time she digested these emotions, she would find that she had improved quite a bit compared to before. This improvement also made her determined to continue to challenge the trial. She didn't know if her footsteps would stop here, but she had to try. After seeing her master's decision, Xiao Hei felt a little helpless, but she still supported her master's decision. All along, the reason why her master was able to stand out from so many people was mainly because of her personality and temperament. The 4th level, the 5th level, the 6th level. Every time she climbed a level, Bailey Hongzhuang felt like she had passed a disaster. She couldn't differentiate between the real environment one by one. Even in the most illogical situation, because of her own mind, everything became real. There are only 3 levels left. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the stairs in front of her. This period of time was extremely long for her, but she had finally passed the 6th level. Her heart had gone through many trials and was no longer the same as before. However, she also felt exceptionally tired, not physically tired, but mentally tired. Master, I believe you can do it. Little Black waved its 2 little arms and said with a smile. Then, Bailey Hongzhuang bravely walked the 7th level. Chapter 63:23. Time flew by like a white steed flitting by a crack. Everything around the bitter sea abyss seemed to be still. Even the seawater did not have any waves. when Zyron and the rest would look at the black and white library every once in a while. However, there was no movement after such a long time. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. It has already been an entire year, and they still haven't come out. Isn't this too long? Shangwan Yingying had a worried expression. Originally, she felt that no news was the best news. However, after waiting for so long, there was no news at all. Their hearts started to pound. It has indeed been too long. Zyron's gaze was deep. It had been so long that he started to wonder if Beichen and Bai Yunfei had really entered the bitter sea abyss. I'd better go in and take a look. Mo Yunjua looked at the entrance to the bitter sea abyss. His handsome face was filled with determination. He knew that his mental state was insufficient. It would be very dangerous if he entered. However, after entering, he would at least know what situation Hong Zhuang and the rest were in. Even if it was dangerous, it would be better than staying here and worrying. Yunjua, that won't do. Zyron quickly objected. If you want to go, I might as well go. Although he did not have much confidence, his situation should be better than Yunjua's. Just then, the nine-tailed inferno fox's voice rang out. It's useless for you to be anxious. This is normal. Once you enter the bitter sea abyss, you will abandon all distracting thoughts. You will forget all your friends, family, and lovers. The only thing left will be the thought of passing and giving up. Not only that, everyone will only see themselves after entering. Even if they are in the same place, they will not be able to see anyone else. Thus, even if you enter, you will not gain anything. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's expressions changed. Thick astonishment appeared on their faces. The situation after entering is actually so strange. Bailey Yunyan said in disbelief. The bitter sea abyss tests the cultivator. All external influences will be eliminated. However, contracted beasts might know a thing or two, the nine-tailed inferno fox said after thinking. Hearing that, Bailey Yin, Che, and Ling, Er's expressions became complicated. If they had known earlier, they would have gone in with Hong Zhuang. That way, they wouldn't have to be so anxious. Then they won't be able to come out for 3 to 5 years, right? Shangwan Yingying was secretly speechless. If it took such a long time, it would be a little terrifying. Di Xiaofeng smiled and said, for cultivators, it's not strange for them to train for 3 to 5 years. The vast majority of cultivators usually take this long when they go out for training. In fact, it should be because your training speed is usually very fast, so you forget the time that others take. That's true. Bailey Yunyan nodded slightly. Although she hadn't gone out much, she was aware of other people's situations. With such strength, 3 to 5 years was nothing out of the ordinary. Is that so? Shangwan Yingying murmured. Indeed. Think about it. Even in the entire upper realm, how many cultivators are able to reach such cultivation at such an age? Normally, the people you come in contact with are all the geniuses of the various large factions. They have cultivation resources that other cultivators can't reach. Under the accumulation of countless natural treasures, they have their current achievements. Chapter 63-24. Di Xiaofeng understood a little. This bitter sea abyss was so different, it would take a long time to pass. A year's time was actually not that long. It seems that we have no other choice but to continue waiting. Ling had a complicated expression. As a contract beast, she had some telepathy. She had felt the pain that went deep in her bones, just like the pain when she thought about Yunjiao. She knew that Hong Zhuang must have experienced a lot of pain. It was just that these emotions disappeared later on. The only thing she could feel now was that Hong Zhuang was still alive. Other than that, she did not know anything else. If it was somewhere else, it would be enough to know that she was still alive. However, in such a place, knowing this was obviously not enough. Time passed, and all the confusion in the world lingered in Bailey Hong Zhuang's mind. She sat quietly in the 9th level of the bitter sea abyss. Her expression was calm with her eyes closed, like an old monk in meditation. There was no emotional fluctuation on her calm face. Time, space, everything had already dissipated in her heart. She was her, but also seemed not to be her. The world changed, everything changed, and whether it moved or not, it was all in her heart. She saw through it, but did not say it out loud. There were all kinds of things in the world, and she could transcend everything in a mortal world. Her heart was unprecedentedly calm. After experiencing all kinds of disasters, looking back at the shackles in her heart, she would find that she was unwilling to let go from the beginning to the end. Suddenly, a golden light burst out, and the top of the bitter sea abyss bloomed with a strong light, illuminating the entire sea area. When Zyron and the others who were cultivating felt as if they were shrouded by a mysterious force, they immediately opened their eyes. After seeing the dazzling golden light at the top of the tower, everyone's face showed a happy smile. I knew they would succeed. Shangwan Yingying's face showed ecstasy. After so many days of nervousness, her heart finally calmed down. This kind of hurdle that is as difficult as ascending to the heavens in the eyes of others seems to be easily broken through by them. I could be considered to have seen through it. When Zyron sighed, he was clearly shaking his head, but the curve of his lips couldn't help but rise. Shangwan Yingying glanced at Zyron and said, "Come on, aren't you always so nervous that you don't know what to do?" Di Xiaofeng and the others softly chuckled. Looking at the golden light, they exclaimed, "I didn't think that someone would actually succeed." The nine-tailed inferno fox had a rueful look on its face. The reason why it had stopped Di Baichen earlier was because it really didn't think well of them. The danger was too great. The slightest carelessness could turn one into a cripple. Who would have thought that it would witness something that no one had succeeded in so many years? But I wonder who succeeded in passing the trial. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. Baichen and Hong Zhuang went in together. Now that one of them had succeeded, they could only relax by half. Since they succeeded, I think they should be coming down soon. Let's wait patiently. Mo Yunga slowly said, his dark eyes carrying a trace of expectation. Both of them are so outstanding. Since one of them succeeded, it should only be a matter of time before the other succeeds. Chapter 63:25. I think this might be fate. Baichen and Hong Zhuang are both people who have obtained two great inheritances of the abyss. They also coincidentally gathered 4 pieces of the map and came to the Bitter Sea Abyss. Now, one of them has obtained the inheritance of the Bitter Sea Abyss. That means they can fuse the 3 great inheritances together. Just thinking about it makes me look forward to it. Bailey Yunyan's eyes shone brightly. Even if all this had nothing to do with her, she couldn't help but feel happy for Baichen and Hong Zhuang. Di Xiaofeng patted Bailey Yunyan's head. When they come out, you'll know what kind of changes will happen after the 3 great powers fuse. After Bailey Hong Zhuang succeeded in passing the level, she felt that everything had suddenly become clear. Looking at the splendid surroundings, a faint smile appeared on her face. If one looked closely, they would find that her eyes had become deeper and calmer than before, revealing a hidden sharpness. Her face obviously didn't change, but it had a trace of tranquility and detachment from worldly affairs. Congratulations, you've passed the level. Reward: see through all falsehoods, Heaven's Eye. The ancient voice sounded again, but it didn't have the same distant feeling as before. Instead, it became incomparably clear, as if an old man was standing beside her. A bright golden light wrapped Bailey Hong Zhuang. Then, Bailey Hong Zhuang felt a sharp pain between her eyebrows, as if something had broken out from between her eyebrows. Blood dripped from between her eyebrows, but she couldn't move. However, this warm golden light was filled with a mysterious power. This power flowed through her body, as if her body had been baptized. The tiredness from these days disappeared with this power. Her body felt relaxed, and she also felt that her cultivation was gradually increasing. When the golden light disappeared, everything returned to its original state, as if nothing had happened. However, Bailey Hong Zhuang was keenly aware that there was an extra thing between her eyebrows. With a thought, an eye appeared between her eyebrows. Through this eye, she could see much more clearly than the naked eye, and the range of her vision was completely beyond imagination. However, there was nothing to see at the moment, so she put it away. With a thought, the third eye disappeared, and the skin between her eyebrows returned to its usual appearance. There were no visible changes at all. So this is the heaven's eye. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed in her heart. Even though she couldn't use it for the time being, she had already felt that the heavens' eye was extraordinary. None of the inheritances of the three great abyss were simple, and the inheritance of the bitter sea abyss was even more impressive. Just as she was deep in thought, she suddenly realized that the bloody aura and killing aura had changed. A powerful and terrifying power had wrapped around her. The bloody aura and killing aura clashed, turning the surroundings into a battlefield. A shocking aura swept through the battlefield, filled with ruthlessness and cruelty. The bloody scene was terrifying. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. Normally, the energy of the blood chi field and the killing chi field had always been very shocking. However, this was the first time that such a situation had occurred. It was really unexpected. Chapter 63:26. The three types of power engulfed Bailey Hongzhuang and swept up into a terrifying storm. She was in the center of the storm. At that moment, Bailey Hongzhuang felt as if she was in the center of a whirlpool. Her body was completely out of her control, and she felt as if she was about to be torn to pieces. "Master, are you all right?" Xiaohe looked nervously at Bailey Hongzhuang. Such a terrifying power was truly shocking. Even though it was outside the storm, it felt that this power was exceptionally terrifying, not to mention Bailey Hongzhuang, who was in the center of the storm. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had no time to answer Xiaohe's question. She could only focus all her energy on dealing with these three types of power. Otherwise, once she was torn to pieces by this storm, she would probably cease to exist. Bailey Hongzhuang furrowed her brows. Her fair and delicate face was now a little pale. She gritted her teeth and held on bitterly. Every second was torture. As time slowly passed, Bailey Hongzhuang's third type of power gradually emitted a simple and peaceful aura. It was this aura that began to neutralize the evil aura of the other two types of power. Even though it was only a slight change, Bailey Hongzhuang could sense that her situation had taken a turn for the better. As the peaceful power gradually increased, the pain she had to endure also began to lessen. She faintly began to realize that perhaps this process was the process of the three great abyss inheritance merging, because these three types of power were the powers of the three great abyss. However, the nine-tailed inferno fox had never mentioned that the merging process would be so painful. However, she was also beginning to look forward to what kind of surprise the merging of the three types of power would bring her. Xiaohe was originally looking nervously at Bailey Hongzhuang, who was in the center of the storm. It was only when it saw that the storm had gradually calmed down that it felt a little more at ease. In this abyss of the sea of misery, there were strange things everywhere. Even though its master had succeeded in breaking through, it did not expect such a thing to happen. It was really worried about what would happen next. Fortunately, what Xiaohe was worried about did not happen again. As the three powers gradually subsided, the golden light also completely disappeared. A smile appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang's face. She had passed through so many stages in fear and trepidation. Now, she had finally completed it. "Master, is it over?" Xiaohe asked. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "We've been here for a long time. Let's get out quickly. I'm sure everyone is worried about us." Ever since she entered the sea of misery, she could only sense the passage of time, but she was unable to discern how much time had passed. After going through the final trial of time, she felt as if she had walked through an entire lifetime. She felt as if she had spent an endless amount of time in the abyss of bitterness. In fact, she was a little scared now. If she had really stayed in the bitter sea abyss for a few decades, would everyone still be outside? I can finally leave this place. Xiaohe heaved a sigh of relief, a look of relief on its face. Staying in this place all day long has almost suffocated me to death. The only good thing is that my cultivation has increased. If it was on a normal day, it could play around or look for delicious food. Its cultivation would not increase as quickly as it did now. After all, in this abyss of bitterness, it could not find anything else to do other than cultivate. Chapter 63:27. My cultivation base has increased by 2 levels. Xiaohe replied honestly. Then I can rest assured. Bailey Hongzhuang heaved a sigh of relief, her entire being feeling much lighter. Master, what do you mean by that? Xiaohe was a little confused. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Originally, I was worried that we would stay here for too long, but according to your cultivation progress, you've improved by 2 levels. At least, it means that we haven't stayed here for too long. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xiaohe immediately understood and chuckled. That's right. I feel that my cultivation speed has been faster than usual. Their cultivation would only improve rapidly when they went out for training or when they encountered great opportunities. As for other times, if they only went into closed-door cultivation, it would take more than a year for them to increase by 2 levels. Although I have become very strong in this 1 year, for most cultivators, this is already considered a very fast speed. When Mo Yunjue and the others saw that the golden light at the top of the pagoda had disappeared, their eyes were filled with anticipation. If they had guessed correctly, this inheritance should have already ended. I wonder who will come out first. Shangguan Ying's face was filled with anticipation. I think it could be Hongzhuang. Her attainments in this area have always been astonishing. I think it should be Beichun. When Ziren pondered and said, I know Beichun quite well. To be honest, although he has had some unfortunate experiences in the past, these things did not have much of an impact on his heart. I think it won't be too difficult for him to pass the trial. As for Hongzhuang, her situation in the past was even more difficult than Beichun's. Hearing Ziren's words, everyone immediately understood. Although Deep Beichun had been assassinated by the Jun family when he was young and had been sent to the lower realm, sect leader Sidhu had always raised him as his own grandson. Although he had suffered some hardships during his training, this was something that every cultivator would experience. In comparison, Hongzhuang had it much harder. In the past, she had always been bullied in Fengbo country and even had her engagement broken off. After that, she only wanted her parents to be in pain. This journey was really not easy. Shangguan Ying was originally very insistent on her idea, but after hearing what Ziren said, she felt that it made sense. Even if Hongzhuang's speed is slower than Beichun's, I believe that she will succeed. In her heart, Hongzhuang was the most powerful person. I think so too. Ziren smiled. Creak. The door to the bitter sea abyss was opened. Everyone's eyes fell on the door, looking forward to the person who would come out. However, when they saw the cultivator's appearance clearly, everyone's faces were filled with shock. It can't be? This? Am I seeing things? Ziren and the others were stunned. The situation in front of them was really beyond their expectations. When Bailey Hongzhuang walked to the door of the bitter sea abyss, she recalled everything that had happened in the past. Actually, she was also curious. Did Beichun also go through the trial while she was going through the trial? With her understanding of Beichun's character, it was most likely so. However, even if she had already broken through, she still felt very scared when she thought about it. She did not know if Beichun could succeed. Chapter 63:28. Beichun. Bailey Hongzhuang's delicate and beautiful face could not hide the surprise in her heart. Her eyes were as bright as the stars, and her clear voice was filled with excitement. Wife, you succeeded. Di Beichun's lips curled into a warm smile. Wu Shuang's face was also filled with surprise, but more than that, it was a sense of relief. He had long guessed that Hongzhuang would not give up on this opportunity. Therefore, after they had succeeded, he had been worried about this problem. In fact, when he heard Hongzhuang mention his name, he felt relieved. This meant that even if she had not succeeded, Hongzhuang had retreated safely. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. It seems that we've both succeeded. This is what it means to be a couple singing together. Di Beichun's lips curled into a devilish smile. Even he was amazed by this amazing tacit understanding between them. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly, but did not refute. She also felt that this was too much of a coincidence. Therefore, just as Shangguan Ying and the others were wondering who had come out, they saw 2 figures appear in front of the door together. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun walked side by side. The man was handsome, and the woman was beautiful. It was as if they were a match made in heaven. You've both come out together? Ziren quickened his pace and quickly greeted them. Previously, I only saw a flash of golden light. What's going on? Not only Xiren, but everyone else was also puzzled. If both of them had succeeded, there should have been 2 flashes of golden light. However, only one of them had appeared. Could it be that only one of them had succeeded? Looking at everyone's puzzled expression, Bailey Hongzhuang only smiled faintly and did not speak. Di Beichen asked, "Can't we both succeed at the same time? Don't joke around. How could there be such a coincidence?" Xiren rolled his eyes, his face full of disbelief. "You must have waited for the other party to succeed before coming out together, right?" Emperor Xiao Feng asked. "Then which one of you succeeded?" Everyone was very curious about this question. Although they hoped that both of them would succeed, failure was also expected. After all, so many people had failed. If one of them could succeed, it would already be very impressive. "We both succeeded," Di Beichun said frankly. "Beichun, it's meaningless for you to make such a joke at a time like this." Xiren frowned. They were really curious about this result. "I'm telling the truth." Di Beichun's face was calm, but he no longer paid any attention to Xiren. His meaning was clear. It was up to him to believe it or not. Xiren and the others were confused. They could only look at Bailey Hongzhuang for help. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang faintly smiled. "Beichun is telling the truth." "What's the truth? You both succeeded?" Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. The smile on her face made her even more beautiful. "That's right. But why do we only see one flash of golden light? This doesn't make sense." Emperor Xiao Feng frowned. Even he felt that this situation did not make sense. It really is such a coincidence. When I found out, I was also very surprised. Bailey Hongzhuang faintly smiled. Let alone everyone else's reaction. Even she felt that it was impossible. Chapter 63:29. I finally understand now. The two of you are really a match made in heaven. Not only did you pass such a difficult checkpoint together, you even passed the checkpoint at the same time. There is no one else who can show off their love like this. Xiren shook his head. Although he already knew that these two guys were beasts, it seemed that he still underestimated the extent of their beastliness. It was obviously a life and death experience. Everyone was worried about their situation, but the result made everyone really speechless. Following Xiren's words, Shengguan Ying and the others also nodded. This was really what they were thinking. This dog food, they ate it. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun smiled faintly and didn't say anything. They were very clear about the tacit understanding between them. Although this result also made them feel very surprised, but thinking about it carefully, it wasn't impossible. "By the way, how long have we been in the Bitter Sea Abyss?" Bailey Hongzhuang asked. She was very curious about this question. Bailey Yunyan replied, "We're not too sure how long we've been in there, but it should be more than a year." Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood. The situation wasn't too different from what she had guessed. "During this period of time, we stayed outside all day worrying. Now we can finally rest assured." Di Xiaofeng sighed faintly. "But this bitter sea is really boring. There's not even a fish swimming in it. We're now done with the level. You can also end these boring days." Di Beichun smiled faintly. "We've been out for so long. It's time for us to go back." Everyone nodded. For ordinary cultivators, more than a year of experience wasn't long. But judging from their daily experience, this time wasn't short. "We can finally go back. Looking at this scenery all day is really boring." Xiren stretched lazily. His posture was lazy and casual. "By the way, what's the inheritance of the Bitter Sea Abyss?" Di Xiaofeng's eyes lit up. "Is this the power that the nine-tailed inferno fox mentioned?" "That's right, this is it." Di Beichen nodded. He was a little more curious about the nine-tailed inferno fox. So many people did not know the specific situation of the Bitter Sea Abyss, but the nine-tailed inferno fox knew so much. It was indeed surprising. "The inheritance of the Bitter Sea Abyss is the Heaven's Eye," Bailey Hongzhuang said with a faint smile. As soon as these words came out, a trace of surprise appeared in everyone's eyes. Heaven's Eye, just hearing this name, makes me feel that it's very impressive. Heaven's Eye, to see through all illusions. This name is really good. Xiren smiled brightly. "If we follow you in the future, won't we be able to eat and drink well?" Looking at Xiren's smug face, Shengguan Yingying rolled her eyes. Get away from me. It's embarrassing. With this power, you won't fall into the illusions set up by other experts in the future. This is really a very powerful power. I'm sure it will be very useful in the future. Di Xiaofeng's face was filled with envy. Almost everyone wanted to have this ability. However, the difficulty of the level was too high. Otherwise, he would also want to go in and try. Chapter 63:30. Following Bailey Yinch's words, everyone had a look of agreement on their faces. How terrifying was the bitter seas level? Since they were able to pass, it meant that their hearts had passed the test. The tests set by other powerhouses were only a test of one aspect, but they had all passed the test, so what was there to worry about? Beichun, you've obtained the inheritance of the three abyss. So has the power merged? Di Xiaofeng raised his eyebrows slightly. The heavens, I was very powerful, but he was more curious about what kind of power the inheritance of the three abyss would be after merging. So far, only one cultivator had managed to do so. Moreover, that cultivator was someone from many years ago. Thus, it was likely that no one in the entire upper realm knew about this. It's merged. Di Beichun's lips curled up slightly. Even he was deeply shocked by the power after the merging. What kind of power is that? Xiren asked curiously. Di Beichun looked at the curious crowd. This power is different from the power we usually come into contact with. When I have the chance, I'll show it to you and you'll understand. Looking at your appearance, I'm afraid that your strength is truly incredible. Xiren's eyes were filled with joy. He knew Di Beichun very well. This guy had always had high standards. However, his expression alone was enough to prove that he was satisfied. The inheritance of each abyss is very amazing. With the three combined, the power will definitely surpass any one of them. Ling Er's voice was cold, and there was a faint joy on her calm face. To her, nothing else was important. The most important thing was that everyone was safe, so she could be at ease. Looking at the bitter seas abyss that was shackled, the shock in everyone's hearts did not dissipate. Such a mysterious and powerful place contained a very terrifying power in this world. In their opinion, the bitter seas abyss itself was not a sin. It only existed to temper everyone's hearts, and it did not deliberately turn them into crazy demons. However, it was too difficult to break through the barrier in one's heart. Most of the cultivators failed at this point. From the beginning to the end, the abyss of misery had only existed for the sake of its existence. Bailey Hongzhuang bowed deeply to the bitter sea abyss. Compared to the other two abyss, she admired the bitter sea abyss more. Even though it was shackled, it was still as immovable as a mountain. It was like a Buddha exuding a calming power. Let's go. Before they left, everyone glanced once more at the sea of misery, and they seemed to want to forever remember its vast and magnificent appearance in their hearts. In the future, they might never come to this place again, but just seeing the bitter sea abyss made them feel that this trip was worth it. After leaving the sea of misery, the group walked on the shore. Now, the coast no longer had the previous 4 seasons of rain and snow. Instead, it had become an extremely ordinary coast. Everyone was slightly stunned when they saw this scene. There was even a trace of an illusion in their minds. Could it be that everything we experienced before was not real? However, that feeling was just too real. Chapter 63:31. If everything before was an illusion, then the abyss of misery is really terrifying. Di Xiaofeng looked at the unfamiliar environment in front of him in disbelief. He had never seen such a realistic environment. Even though they had this thought at the beginning, they still erased it in the end. This was because they couldn't find any flaws in the illusion. Perhaps it was because all the weather was unreasonable, so they could no longer distinguish between the reasonable and the unreasonable among the countless unreasonable weather. Even after entering the abyss of the bitter sea, they had never realized that all of this was fake. Since the abyss of misery can see through all fabrications, then the illusion it creates will naturally be even more terrifying. Di Beichun was not as surprised as the others. In fact, after passing all the levels in the abyss of misery, he already understood everything. Only by understanding everything could he create such a realistic and impeccable illusion. The power after the fusion of the three great powers is somewhat similar to the illusion we encountered before. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up slightly. In the past, when she faced the sudden change in weather, she was also helpless and anxious. Now that she understood everything, she was more in awe. Even if their cultivation was getting stronger, they still had to be in awe in the face of these powerful powers. That was because these powers had completely exceeded their understanding. As the voice of Bailey Hongzhuang fell, everyone present was startled, and then there was a deep shock and joy in their eyes. Is that true? After the fusion of the three powers, there's actually such a shocking power? If you really master this power, it'll be a great killing weapon. Illusionary realms were something that every cultivator yearned for and feared. They often encountered illusions, and the various powers in these illusions would cause them to fall into a predicament. It was not easy to break out of the illusion. If they also had the means to create illusions, it meant that they had another powerful means. If they directly created an illusion when facing an opponent, it would take a lot of effort for the opponent to break out of the illusion. Taking advantage of this time, they could easily get rid of a difficult opponent. The powers we have are very similar. If I'm not wrong, everything we encountered before was not an illusion. Her pitch-black phoenix eyes flickered with wisdom, and her delicate jade-like face bloomed with confidence. Hongzhuang, what do you mean? Mo Yunjue raised his eyebrows in confusion. It's not an illusion. It's an existence that's one level higher than an illusion. A boundary. A boundary. Everyone chanted this strange, yet familiar word in unison. The illusory realm is an illusory world created by a cultivator. It is a type of illusory technique. Everything is fake. A boundary is a small world condensed by the cultivator's own power. Every blade of grass and every tree there is created by the cultivator. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly expressed her opinion. When she was in an illusion, she would always find a way to break through it by looking at some details. Chapter 63:32. The barrier was different. Many cultivators might not be able to tell when they enter it. In addition, there's another difference. Because the barrier is built by the cultivator at will, he has the ability to control everything in the barrier. In other words, he can create the most favorable environment for himself and then deal with his opponent in this environment. Di Beichen's voice slowly sounded, and his deep eyes revealed a trace of thought. As soon as these words came out, everyone's expression changed. If they didn't understand how big the difference between the two was before, then now after the two's introduction, they knew how terrifying the barrier was. If that's the case, then the power of the barrier is really too strong. Bailey Union's face was filled with emotion. Although she didn't understand it very well, just from the information she learned, it was simply a great weapon. With this ability, there would be no problem in fighting beyond one's level. Illusions are often set up long ago. It requires the cultivator to walk into the trap set up by themselves. However, the barrier doesn't need to be set up at all because it doesn't need to be induced. It's a means to deal with the cultivator. Am I right? Mo Yunjue pondered for a moment before speaking his opinion. He didn't understand this term at first. After thinking carefully, he understood the difference between the two. From his point of view, the difference between the two wasn't big at all. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. That's right, that's it. Di Beichen nodded. Bai Lian Che and the others also understood. This is really shocking. The inheritance of the three great abyss is really extraordinary. This kind of power is really enviable. At this moment, everyone also understood what the nine-tailed inferno fox said before. The reason why the cultivator could be so outstanding was that this ability must have helped him a lot. Beichen, Big Brother will have to rely on you in the future. Di Xiaofeng put a hand on Di Beichen's shoulder. I used to think that after you came to the upper realm, as your brother, I would have to take good care of you. Now it seems that I will have to rely on you to protect me in the future. In the past, he had always thought that he was the chosen one, but now that he thought about it, Beichen and Hongzhuang's abilities were really too strong. When facing other cultivators from the upper realm, he still had some confidence. However, when facing these two, he did not even have the thought of competing. The skeleton army and the summoning technique were almost beyond their understanding. Now, with the addition of this barrier, they had far surpassed their peers. Perhaps some people were born to be worshipped by others. If they were treated as an opponent, it would be very painful. However, if they were treated as one of their own, it would be very satisfying. Di Baichen smiled and looked at Di Xiaofeng. Big brother, we brothers have one life. Hearing this, Emperor Xiaofeng's smile gradually widened, turning into a dazzling smile. You're right. Do you plan to tell others about the secret of the Bitter Sea Abyss in the future? Shangguan Yingying suddenly said. In the past, no one knew about the existence of the Bitter Sea Abyss. Now that they had discovered it, the location of the Bitter Sea Abyss would not change. Then, should they tell others about this matter? Chapter 63:33. Since the Abyss of Agony has disappeared for so many years, the senior who did all this must have his reasons. Since that's the case, there's no need for us to ruin everything. Bailey Hongzhuang smirked and looked at the blue sea behind her. There was a very powerful force in the world there. However, we can spread the map fragment. If someone can gather all 4 of the map fragments, it means that he's fated with the Abyss of Agony. Who knows? There might be some cultivators who've succeeded in breaking through in the future. Bailey Hongzhuang's black and white eyes shone brightly like gems. She vaguely felt that this should be the senior's intention. If he really wanted this force to disappear from the world, he could have used a certain method to make the Abyss of Agony disappear or hide it forever. However, he let the Abyss of Agony sink to the bottom of the sea, but did not make it disappear completely. It must be because he could not bear to let it go. It would be a pity if such a powerful force disappeared just like that. The reason why it disappeared from most people's sight was to let the fated person come here and let people know that there was such a special and powerful inheritance in the world. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone nodded. They also felt that it would be a pity if the news of the Abyss of Agony disappeared forever. If he didn't spread this map, there would be almost no cultivators coming to such a remote and desolate place. This is a good decision, I agree. Shangguan Yingying was the first to raise her hand in agreement. I agree too. Everyone chuckled. Not only did Bailey Hongzhuang and Zheng Ziren gain a lot from this trip, the others also gain a lot. Because they were bathed in the light of the Abyss of Agony, they felt that their hearts were calmer than ever before. There was a huge change in their state of mind. Beichun, since you succeeded in breaking through, did your strength increase by a lot? In the past, as long as they succeeded in breaking through the 2 abysses, their strength would increase by a lot. It should be the same this time. I feel that the distance between us is getting bigger. Ziren looked up to the sky and let out a long sigh. Every day, he did not have any other thoughts. His only thought was to quickly increase his cultivation and not be left too far behind by Di Baichen. However, this guy was simply a freak. Even if he tried his best to catch up, the gap between the 2 of them seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. It was impossible to close the gap. Di Baichen said slowly, "No, we've been taking the psychological test for more than a year. We haven't been cultivating, so our strength hasn't improved much." As soon as he said this, Ziren stared at Di Baichen for a while and asked, "Is what you said true? You're not lying to me? Do I look that bored?" Di Baichen asked. After repeatedly confirming that Di Baichen was telling the truth, Ziren also laughed out loud. "Ha ha! I've finally found some sense of existence. Otherwise, it would be too uncomfortable to be unconsciously distanced from you." Di Xiaofeng and the others were also a little surprised, but thinking about it carefully, this situation was reasonable. If they not only obtained such a powerful method when breaking through, but their strength also increased rapidly, it would be too much of a blow. Chapter 63:34. Everyone headed towards the direction of the D family. They had spent quite a lot of time on this trip. However, if the D family knew about Beiqin and Hongzhuang's gains, they would be very pleased. However, just as everyone was moving forward, suddenly, multicolored light shone and a dazzling light gradually appeared in the sky. A huge cloud emitting multicolored light slowly floated in the direction of everyone. That cloud was like a celestial cloud. It was a unique existence, dazzling and shocking. Almost at the moment this cloud appeared, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others noticed its existence. "What is that?" Shangguaning Ying exclaimed as she pointed at the cloud above. Even in broad daylight, this multicolored light was too dazzling. It was abnormally bright among the white clouds in the sky and could be noticed at a glance. "There's actually such a cloud in this world?" Bailey Union's expression was not much better than Shangguaning Ying's. This was really too shocking. This kind of scene had only appeared in her dreams before. She had never thought that it would actually appear in reality. Although Di Xiaofeng and the others did not speak, their eyes were also tightly locked on this rainbow cloud. This situation was simply beyond their understanding and was unbelievable. Did we stay in the bitter abyss for too long? Is that why we're hallucinating? Bailey Yin Che's mind went blank. Wasn't this too unreal? Even if it really appeared in front of them, no one felt that it was real. When Xiren turned his gaze to Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang, "Is this the enchantment you guys cast? You want us to see your gains, so you set up such a beautiful scene?" Everyone's eyes fell on the two of them. Other than this explanation, they really couldn't think of any other explanation. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Yunyan looked at each other. This situation was also completely out of their expectations. "This matter has nothing to do with us." Seeing the serious appearance of the two, everyone was slightly startled. When they once again looked towards the cloud that was blooming with multicolored light, everyone was confused. In the end, the cloud stopped in the sky not far away from the crowd. "Should we go up and take a look?" Di Xiaofeng's eyes were filled with amazement. "I seem to see a door in the clouds. Could it be that we found a door to a small world by chance?" A door appeared in the clouds. It was obvious that there was another world behind the door. It was just like the time when they ventured into the immortal cloud secret realm. Although the scene back then couldn't be compared to the scene before them, there were still some similarities. However, this also meant that the world behind this door was probably even stronger than the immortal cloud realm. A trace of curiosity arose in the hearts of everyone. It was rare to encounter such an opportunity, so it would be a pity if they didn't charge forward to take a look. "Go, let's go take a look." Just as everyone was about to charge forward, the nine-tailed Inferno Fox's voice suddenly rang out. "Pass through this door, and you will arrive at the crossing immortal region." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's expression changed. They were filled with shock and astonishment. "The crossing immortal domain is behind this door?" Nine-tailed Inferno Fox, you're not lying to us, right? Why would I lie to you about something like this? Chapter 63:35. Everyone looked at each other. According to their understanding, the nine-tailed Inferno Fox was not a demonic beast that liked to joke. Moreover, every word it said had its own basis. After all, it was a demonic beast from the immortal region. Moreover, it was a demonic beast of an extremely high level. It knew much more than they did. "Didn't you say that the door to the immortal region has been closed?" Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly. This was what she did not understand the most. According to Feng Qing, the immortal region had stopped the cultivators from the immortal region from ascending. Because there were more and more cultivators in the immortal region, the door to the immortal region had been closed. It was because of this that no cultivators from the upper realm had been able to successfully ascend to the immortal region. However, the door had suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Wasn't this a little strange? Indeed, the entrance to the immortal region has been closed. Could it be that something has happened recently? So, the entrance has been opened again? His deep eyes were filled with thoughts. The situation in the immortal region had not remained unchanged. Could it be that something had happened in the past year? The entrance to the immortal region has been closed. The nine-tailed Inferno Fox was also a little surprised. The immortal region is the entrance for cultivators from the lower realm to ascend. How can it be closed so casually? Now that the nine-tailed Inferno Fox was someone they could trust, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun did not hide anything. They immediately told it what they knew about the immortal region and the immortal region. Simply bastards. After hearing everything, the nine-tailed Inferno Fox could not help but curse. These people are really daring. For their own benefits, they can even do such a thing. I'm afraid the entire immortal region will be in chaos. Seeing that the nine-tailed Inferno Fox was so angry, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others looked at each other. Although they also felt that the people of the immortal domain were too much to do such a thing, they didn't need to be so angry. The crossing immortal domain has always been the entrance for cultivators from the lower planes to ascend. Although there aren't many cultivators from each lower plane who can ascend, there's still quite a lot of cultivators gathered together. If the entrance to the crossing immortal domain was closed, it meant that the cultivators from the lower plane could not ascend, causing some cultivators to be unable to improve their strength. Now that the celestial realm is lacking some fresh blood, those fellows think that they have occupied such a good place. What a joke. The nine-tailed Inferno Fox sneered. The rules set by the heavens naturally have its reasons. If these fellows continue to act willfully, they will be punished sooner or later. Hearing the nine-tailed Inferno Fox's furious words, Bailey Hongzhuang slightly nodded her head. She also felt that the actions of the immortal domain cultivators were too wrong. However, she had never thought about the punishment. Of now, it seemed that the situation was more complicated than they had imagined. Di Xiaofeng and Bailey Yunyan listened to Di Beichen's conversation with the nine-tailed Inferno Fox about the immortal domain and the crossing immortal domain. Their faces were blank, and their hearts were filled with shock. The crossing celestial domain, what they knew so far was only a name. As for the celestial realm, it was a place that they had never even heard of. However, not only did Beichen and the others know about the existence of the crossing immortal domain, they even knew that the entrance was closed. Chapter 63:36. The two of them were confused. They only felt that they were in a completely different place from Beichen and the rest. These things were secrets to the entire upper realm, but to them, they were like rumors on the streets. No matter how they thought about it, they couldn't understand how deep Beichen and the rest knew about all this. Now that the entrance to the crossing immortal domain has appeared, perhaps there have been changes in this 1 year. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen. She naturally didn't want the entrance to the crossing immortal domain to be closed, but she hoped that the entrance to the immortal domain could also be opened. Otherwise, even if they entered the crossing immortal domain, their ending would be the same as Fong Qing's previous situation. Other than being forced to work as a coolie, there was probably no other path for him to take. Previously, they had already done manual labor in the spirit-devouring mine. After so long, would the people in the spirit-devouring mine still be looking for them? If they fell into the spirit-devouring mine again, they would be dead. That might not be the case. The nine-tailed Inferno Fox suddenly said. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. Why? The reason why the two of you were able to attract the entrance to the crossing immortal domain is because you passed the inheritance of the bitter sea abyss, and your state of mind is greatly improved. For the matter of ascension, other than looking at the cultivator's strength, it also requires the cultivator to increase their state of mind or have a deep understanding of the laws of heaven and earth. The bitter sea abyss is the most amazing inheritance in the lower realm. Through the power of the bitter sea abyss, it's not strange that the change in your state of mind would attract the entrance to the crossing immortal domain. Some powers can't be stopped even if the crossing immortal domain closes the entrance, so the situation may not be as simple as you think. The nine-tailed Inferno Fox slowly said. Hearing this, everyone immediately understood. The nine-tailed Inferno Fox must be talking about that kind of force majeure. I see. Bailey Hongzhuang understood. As they got closer to the clouds, she also saw a simple and gorgeous door. Looking from below, they didn't feel that it was so grand. Only when they got closer did they realize that the door was much bigger than they imagined. The grand and majestic aura of this place was definitely not something that the upper realms buildings could compare to. Just from an entrance alone, one could see how powerful this place was. When Xiren and the others also wanted to take a closer look at the situation, but found that after getting a little closer, they couldn't get any closer. An invisible force imprisoned them, and the holy radiance of the multicolored light made them want to worship it. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen had a different feeling. They only felt a strong force trying to suck them in. Di Xiaofeng stared blankly at the door in front of him, his heart filled with shock. Previously, when he heard that Shu Yu had been to crossing immortal domain, his heart was filled with yearning. However, other than yearning, there was more of a distant feeling. He only felt that it was an extremely distant existence. How many cultivators wanted to enter the crossing celestial domain, but had no way to do so? However, right now, this great door was right in front of them. It was releasing multicolored light, divine and dignified. All of this was so close to them unknowingly. His younger brother and sister-in-law were about to enter the crossing celestial domain. Beichun, are you planning to go to the immortal domain? Chapter 63:37. According to their current understanding, the situation in the crossing immortal domain should be very dangerous. If the door to the crossing immortal domain was not open, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun's appearance would definitely attract the attention of the entire crossing immortal domain. The tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. Once they entered the crossing immortal domain, it would not be easy to come back. If they were in the abandoned immortal forest, they could still go to the chaotic immortal domain to gain an identity. However, if they went to the crossing immortal domain and could not come out, it would be really troublesome. After all, they could only enter the crossing immortal domain when the people from the crossing immortal domain opened the door. The situation in the crossing immortal domain is a little dangerous now. Bailey Yin-che also said. However, as a contract beast, if Hong Zhuang went, he would definitely follow. Bailey Hongzhuang also fell into hesitation. The crossing immortal domain was indeed a place that she wanted to go to. This was because only when the door to the crossing immortal domain was opened, her family would have the chance to ascend. However, if they entered the crossing immortal domain alone, would they be able to change the situation in the crossing immortal domain? If they could not, it would be very dangerous for them to enter the crossing immortal domain. After a while, Di Beichun said, "We won't go for now." Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichun and nodded. Before they had enough confidence, it was not a wise decision to go to the crossing immortal domain, let alone when the door to the crossing immortal domain was closed. Di Xiaofeng did not expect the two of them to make such a decision. He was stunned. You're choosing to give up such a good opportunity? Currently, countless powerhouses from the upper realm wanted to go to the crossing immortal domain, but they did not have the chance. Now that the opportunity was in front of them, they chose to give it up. This was too unbelievable. If they missed this opportunity, they did not know when they would be able to go again in the future. Seeing how anxious Di Xiaofeng was, Di Beichun smiled faintly and said, "Big brother, there's nothing to be sad about. We'll go eventually, but the situation in the crossing immortal domain is very bad now. If we go, Hong Zhuang and I might not be able to protect ourselves. It's a wise decision not to go now." Is the crossing immortal domain that dangerous? Di Xiaofeng was slightly startled. Even though he heard everyone's words, he did not take it to heart. It was a place that was much stronger than the upper realm. If it were any other cultivator, they would not give up on it. The crossing immortal domain's current crossing immortal domain is indeed very immortal domains. Di Xiaofeng sighed. It was such a pity to give up on such an opportunity. Seeing this, Di Beichun smiled and said, "Big brother, do you think Shu Yu is powerful? He's been to the crossing celestial region." "Of course he's powerful," replied Di Xiaofeng. "In the entire upper world, Shu Yu is publicly acknowledged as the #1 expert. He wasn't sure if he was the strongest, but just based on the fact that Shu Yu had been to the crossing immortal domain, his status wasn't something that other cultivators could compare to. What if I tell you that he escaped from the crossing immortal domain?" Di Beichun smiled. Shu Yu was very powerful in the eyes of others, but in reality, he was just a deserter who could not survive in the crossing immortal domain. Di Xiaofeng and Bailey Yin were both stunned by his words. Chapter 63:38. Are you telling the truth? Di Xiaofeng was in disbelief. This was the first time he had heard of this. Di Beichun nodded slightly. The crossing immortal domain is actually the place where the more outstanding cultivators of each plane ascend to. Only after ascending to the crossing immortal domain and achieving a certain level of success can one truly ascend to the immortal domain. In other words, becoming an immortal. Bailey Yunyan and Di Xiaofeng's eyes lit up. Becoming an immortal was something they all dreamed of. So, now that the entrance to the immortal domain has been closed, it means that these people can't become immortals? Di Xiaofeng was smart. After the shock, he had already figured out the reason. That's right. To us, the cultivators in crossing immortal domain are experts, but to the people in the immortal domain, they are nothing. Di Xiaofeng nodded. Although this was cruel, it was the truth. Although we don't know who decided to close the entrance to the immortal domain and why, we can be sure that the cultivators in crossing immortal domain have a miserable ending. On one hand, they can't ascend to the immortal domain. On the other hand, they can't return to their previous plane. Under such circumstances, many cultivators in the immortal region directly treated them as coolies and made them mine ores. At this point, Di Beichun had no intention of hiding anything from Di Xiaofeng. To them, crossing immortal domain was a very distant matter. But now it was no longer distant. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before they could come into contact with all of this. These mines aren't the ordinary mines we usually mine. These mines will cause irreversible damage to the cultivator's body after a long time. Bailey Hongzhuang added. After hearing all this, Di Xiaofeng and Bailey Yunyan's hearts couldn't calm down for a long time. They never thought that the world they yearned for so much would be like this. The so-called crossing immortal domain was actually such a place. No wonder Shu Yu rarely talks about the upper realm. So this is the real reason. Di Xiaofeng suddenly understood. This place that was incomparably glorious in the eyes of the upper realm cultivators was actually filled with danger and oppression. If it was anyone else, they probably wouldn't be willing to talk about it. Beichun, if that's really the case, then you shouldn't go for the time being. Di Xiaofeng's expression was serious. Not only do we have to face all sorts of dangers there, we can't even cultivate. It's better to stay in the upper realm. Although the cultivation here might not be as good as the crossing immortal domain, with our current status in the upper realm, we can live very well. Di Beichun smiled faintly. After deciding not to go with Bailey Hongzhuang, the entrance to the crossing immortal domain gradually disappeared. Although it was a wise decision not to go, for some reason, seeing the entrance disappear makes me feel a little regretful. Shangguan and Ying looked at the direction where the entrance of the crossing immortal domain disappeared. Once they entered, it would be a whole new world. Don't worry about it. Since you have already met the requirements to enter the crossing immortal domain, it is only a matter of time before you appear again, said the nine-tailed inferno fox. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. If they could go to the chaotic immortal domain first, and then go to the crossing immortal domain, the situation would be much better. Chapter 63:39. As Xiren's voice fell, everyone chuckled. Indeed, they had been cultivating together for such a long time. If they had to separate, everyone was really unwilling from the bottom of their hearts. The reason why Beichin and Hongzhuang could come into contact with the gate of the crossing immortal domain so quickly was inseparable from the Bittersea Abyss. And if they wanted to come into contact with the crossing immortal domain, strength was one aspect and mental state was another aspect. It would probably take a long time to catch up with them. Other things weren't what they cared about the most. What they cared about the most was if they couldn't help Beichun and the others when they needed help. Don't worry. Since young, when have you not been following me? Di Beichun looked at Xiren teasingly. Since young, except for when they were in their respective sects, the two were basically together. Xiren looked embarrassed. Although that's true, I'm already so old now. You're talking as if I'm still a follower when I was young. As soon as this was said, everyone laughed. Xiren, you finally have a clear understanding of yourself. Di Beichun said earnestly. You're really not polite at all. Xiren rolled his eyes. In the past, Beichun would at least explain a little, but now he simply admitted it. Everyone walked forward. When they came, they only felt that the journey was very long, but when they went back, the journey seemed much faster. Bei-chun, I don't understand. How do you know so much about the immortal domain? In the dead of night, Di Xiaofeng and Di Bei-chun leaned against a tree. He couldn't help but ask the doubts in his heart. Since that day, he had always had doubts in his heart. This information was probably only known to people in the immortal domain. Logically speaking, Bei-chun and the others shouldn't have any way to know about it. However, Bei-chun and the others were very familiar with the situation in the upper realm. This was simply inconceivable in his opinion. Di Bei-chun wasn't surprised by Di Xiaofeng's curiosity. In fact, he thought that Di Xiaofeng would have asked him a long time ago. He didn't expect him to wait until now. Big brother, actually, we've been to the immortal region before. Di Bei-chun smiled faintly. Hearing Di Bei-chun's words, Di Xiaofeng widened his eyes and said in disbelief, "How is this possible? You haven't even been to the immortal domain. How could you go there directly?" To be precise, we went to the immortal realm, but we didn't enter the real immortal realm, so we have some understanding of the situation there. Emperor Xiaofeng shook his head and frowned. Don't beat around the bush. My question is, how could you have been to the celestial realm? You'll have to ask Hong Zhuang about that. Di Bei-chun smiled faintly. It's all thanks to Hong Zhuang that we were able to go to the immortal region. What does that mean? Di Xiaofeng was confused. He felt that the more Di Bei-chun explained, the more complicated things became. He didn't understand. Di Bei-chun thought for a moment before telling him about how Hong Zhuang opened the entrance to the abandoned immortal forest. After hearing this, Di Xiaofeng fell into shock for a long time. Why do I feel like everything that happened to you is so strange? If it was anyone else, I wouldn't believe it at all. However, it happened to you guys, so no matter how unbelievable it is, it's true. Chapter 6340. Actually, we were also very surprised when we first found out. Di Bei-chun was very calm, facing Di Xiaofeng's speechlessness. The chaos ring was already very powerful. Without it, the thorns they encountered along the way would have been even more shocking. So for the closed-door cultivation that you talked about was actually going to the abandoned immortal forest? At first, Di Xiaofeng felt that it was strange. If it was just cultivation, it wouldn't matter if someone disturbed them. Now that he understood everything, he completely understood. Di Bei-chun nodded slightly. That's right. I finally understand. Di Xiaofeng's face was filled with realization. You guys are really too terrifying. Even such a fortuitous encounter could happen. But since you guys can go to the abandoned immortal forest, why didn't you tell everyone? You should know that Father and the others all want to come into contact with the crossing immortal domain. With Father's strength, if the entrance to the crossing immortal domain wasn't closed, he should be able to come into contact with the crossing immortal domain very quickly. Actually, it's not a bad thing that the entrance to the crossing immortal domain is closed. Otherwise, everyone's situation would be even worse. The reason why we didn't say it was because we didn't go to the abandoned immortal forest through normal means. This is only a shortcut, but if everyone follows this path, it will definitely destroy the balance. The heavens have their own rules. If we really destroy the balance, it might not be a good thing. It might even lead to an even greater disaster. Di Bei-chun's face darkened. It wasn't that he didn't consider this, but after thinking about it carefully, he realized that it wasn't a good thing. That was why he didn't say it directly. Di Xiaofeng fell into silence. After a while, he nodded. You're right. If this gets out of hand, there might be a lot of trouble. There were many things where blindly taking things would lead to great risks. He didn't see it as clearly as Di Bei-chun. So, the stones you brought back last time? The stones from the immortal domain. Di Bei-chun smiled. Di Xiaofeng's face was calm. No wonder I've never seen them in the upper realm. If there were, this news wouldn't have been able to be hidden. The cultivation resources in the immortal region are indeed much more abundant than those in the upper realm. However, the reason why we were able to obtain these spirit-devouring stones is also a coincidence. Frankly speaking, we were captured to mine, and these spirit-devouring stones are our harvest. It can't be. You were actually captured and sent to mine? Di Xiaofeng was stunned. He always felt that with the strength of Bei-chun and the others, they should be doing well in the immortal realm. In front of the experts of the immortal domain, we are like ants. That's why we came back from the abandoned immortal forest. Right now, the most important thing is to increase my cultivation. When the time comes, I'll go to the abandoned immortal forest. At the very least, I'll have a better chance of survival. Noticing that Di Xiaofeng was very interested in the immortal realm, Di Beichun slowly told him everything they knew. Di Xiaofeng listened attentively. He originally had many fantasies about the crossing immortal domain and the immortal domain, but after Di Beichun's introduction, the plates in his mind gradually became clear. However, at the same time, he also understood that the immortal realm was an even crueler world.